That's it.
Some people say, okay, some people go, some people
Yeah, the impression I had was probably.
There you go.
I have no clue.
Probably be even worse.
One time. All right, good morning, everyone. I beg your pardon. All right. I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this beautiful, bright yet cold morning in Harrisonburg. I wanted to take a moment to reflect on the tragedy this week at UVA. I did reach out to UVA's rector, Will Clement, on behalf of the Board of Visitors to send a note of our care and support, as I know that President Alger, Jeff Warren, and Xavier Williams have also reached out to their constituents in that space. I would like to take just a moment of silence in remembrance of the victims, Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and Laval Davis Jr., who were killed, Mike Collins and Marley Morgan, who were injured, as well as the entire UVA community. Thank you. Let's stay focused on keeping our campuses safe and eliminating these senseless crimes. I also wanted to welcome the Impact Program members. I understand there might be up to 17 joining us. Would you please stand? Thank you very much and welcome. For those of you who don't know, the Impact Program is a really wonderful leadership development program that is hosted on the campus. So thank you all for joining us today. Before we actually start through the agenda, I did want to take a moment to make an acknowledgement. I would have done so at the end of our meeting in September, but when there were very few people who were still here when we came out of our closed session. And there was a very smart man, actually it was Tim Miller, who suggested that I actually start this meeting off with the comments I would have made then. JMU is embarking on one of the most significant chapters in the history of the university. Over the past year, there were a number of dramatic, very positive events that occurred that have positioned us to be in a very enviable position. I'm just going to name a few of them. Moving to the new RT2 Carnegie classification. This reclassification has shifted academia's view of this campus, and among the many other benefits, will help draw more interest from faculty, administration, and students, enhancing our already brilliant team. This reclassification is also going to attract more grants and funding, which, as we know, is always welcomed. Moving to the FBS, as we have already seen, our Dukes are thriving at this level. The university continues to be praised for our seamless transition and the success of our student athletes across all of women's and men's sports. The enhanced exposure continues to support one of our key strategic objectives. The successful completion of the Unleashed campaign, which was celebrated last month, having achieved the highest total ever in a capital campaign of over $250 million, with the final and largest gift ever of $5 million being donated by Paul Holland and Linda Yates. The completion of the task force on racial equity, delivering 60+ short, medium, and long-term recommendations. and the increase in funding from Richmond, helping to ease some of the discrepancies in our funding. While the board completely recognizes that each and every one of these efforts was driven, supported, and completed with the help of the entire campus community, they would not have happened without the strategic vision, planning, and tireless dedicated support and commitment from our president, John Alger. He set the course for each of these accomplishments many years ago, some almost as soon as he stepped on campus. He also weathered the storm of unpopular decisions for things like not moving to FBS when we received earlier offers. He, as well as his wife, Mary Ann, have spent thousands of hours personally meeting with donors and absolutely ably representing JMU. He positioned this university to be ready when the time was right, and his leadership was instrumental in our success. On behalf of the entire board, I want to say thank you, John, and let you know how much we absolutely appreciate you. With that, we are going to move into our agenda. First item is the consent agenda. Does anyone around the table want to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right, with that, may I have an emotion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. Thank you, Ms. Major. Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? All right, thank you. Okay, great. So first, next on the agenda is our committee reports, academic excellence. We have Matt Gray-Keeling joining us from YouTube.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Good morning from Richmond. The Academic Excellence Committee heard the following reports at our meeting yesterday. First, we had our divisional update from our provost, Heather Coltman. She shared, as Mary Beth just did, our condolences for those impacted by the recent shooting and deaths at the University of Virginia. And she noted, as she has before, the mental health supports that exist on campus for our students as well as our faculty and staff. She talked about how academic affairs is addressing issues of affordability, accessibility, and accountability, all things that the board has expressed are very important. And most recently, they hosted an interactive workshop series for leaders in academic affairs and faculty members focused on increasing quality, access, and inclusion. And she talked a little bit about the external networks that she's a part of that are, as we are so important to JMU, the relationships that are being built off campus, including with other provosts in the Sunbelt Conference, a new development, of course, the other provosts in Virginia, and the Association of Chief Academic Officers. And the update concluded with a summary of all the meaningful and significant research that is being done by our faculty with the support of our students. We heard from Kathy Ott-Walter, our faculty Senate speaker. She shared that the Senate is focused now on strengthening shared governance, something we talked quite a bit about yesterday, by making policy and handbook and procedural recommendations to the administration. And she highlighted some research projects that are being done in kinesiology and the finance departments. We heard from Paula Maxwell, who is the Associate Vice Provost for Curriculum Development, and she presented a proposal to discontinue 7 academic programs. And she reported that these programs currently have no students enrolled, and no students will be disadvantaged by the removal of these programs. I want to note a couple of things. One, this is not what we usually hear, right? We're usually approving new programs. But this is work that the university is always doing, right? Monitoring where programs might be discontinued. It's also an objective that the board established at its retreat, that we take a careful look at where programs have grown to be smaller over time. So, Madam Rector, there's a motion from our committee, and I move that the full board approve these academic programs for discontinuance: the Autism Spectrum Disorders Undergraduate Certificate, the Autism Spectrum Disorders Graduate Certificate, the Network and Information Security Graduate Certificate, the Secure Computer and Database Systems Graduate Certificate, the Educational Technology Leadership Graduate Certificate, the International Management of Non-Governmental Organizations Graduate Certificate, and the Writing, Rhetoric, and Technical Communications MS degree designation.
Thank you, Mr. Greg Keeling. This motion does not need a second, so all of those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? So moved. Thank you.
We next heard from Narkita Sparkman Key. She's the Associate Provost for Inclusive Strategies and Equity Initiatives. She joined us relatively recently from ODU, and she provided an overview of the work that her office does. They're focused on fostering inclusive culture, supporting strategic planning, implementing inclusive hiring practices, addressing the recommendations of the Task Force for Racial Equity that the Rector was just speaking about, addressing themes from our recent climate study, among a lot of other work. She discussed that her work aligns with the Academic Affairs Strategic Plan, as well as JMU's Strategic Plan, and the guiding principles for education as proposed by Governor Youngkin. Finally, we had a presentation from the College of Science and Mathematics. We heard from Sam Prinz, the dean there, and a number of her associates who highlighted all the curriculum that's in development there, all of the academic supports that are provided by the students in that college, and the involvement of faculty and all kinds of work there. She also noted the strong track record of externally funded research there, all the many large and many grants that college has received for its research work. And finally, we heard from Callie Naden of the class of 2024, who shared the impact of their research experiences on the development of their professional identity. Our meeting adjourned at 2:41 p.m. Madam Rector, I move the report of the Academic Excellence Committee be accepted.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion about this report? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Next up is the Advancement and Engagement Committee, Mr. Welburn.
Good morning, everyone. The Advancement Committee heard the following reports at our meeting on November 17th, 2022. In addition, we learned everyone's favorite Thanksgiving food item as we prepare for our Thanksgiving on Thursday. We received a fundraising report. Gerald Lowry presented the athletic funds raised to date and the numbers as of October 21st, 2022. Stating $787,000 had been committed for the year of 2023. In our first fiscal year post-campaign report through November 11th, 2022, $9.4 million has been committed for the year of 2023. Our largest success to date has come from our corporate and foundations with commitments of $5.1 million. And currently we have $19.9 million in active major gifts proposed that we're actively attempting to close. Next, we received a government relations preview. Caitlin Reed reported on the various ways that the JMU Office of State Government Relations engaged with members of the General Assembly and other state level officials throughout the year. Engagement strategies include hosting members for the General Assembly and the staff on campus, visiting staff level officers in their home districts, maintaining a frequent visibility in Richmond, as well as one of the items which I thought was really cool on there. They said birthday cards, just reaching out to the General Assembly and just celebrating their birthdays. In addition, our next report, we received the campaign celebration wrap up. Nick Langridge And the members of the advancement team reported on the recapping of the Unleashed celebration, which took place during homecoming weekend. Festivities marked the conclusion of the 8-year campaign, which saw over 83,000 donors giving over $250 million in support for the university priorities and initiatives. Next, we received the social media recognition analysis analytics from Mary Hope Voss, providing an overview of the university's communications and discussed the recent successes. Next, we received a report from our CRM update. Nick Langridge and Andy Perrine shared the progress of the advancement CRM replacement project as part of the re-engineering Madison enterprise-wide data system. And then lastly, we received a report, an enrollment marketing update. Andy Breen presented updates for advertising for enrollment. Our meeting adjourned early at 4:10 p.m. Madam Rector, I move that the report from the Advancement Committee be accepted.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion other than what was the favorite Thanksgiving?
Oh, we got some good stuff.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Right. Thank you. Next, athletics, Mr. Lynch.
Yes, good morning. The Athletics Committee heard the following reports at the meeting on Thursday, November 17th. We started with an athletics update. JMU teams have compiled a 66, 29, and 9 cumulative record for a 67.8% winning percentage. Football sits 6-3 to start its transitional FBS season and became the first school ever to be nationally ranked in its first transitioning season. We also had a brief discussion about the JMU win over its in-state rival ODU last weekend, which we were pleased about. Men's soccer went 8-8 and 4 and finished 7th in the highly competitive Sun Belt. They lost 2-0 in the SBC championship, but a very successful season. Women's soccer had a strong first Sun Belt campaign, going 12-4-5 and finishing as runner-up in the Sun Belt championship with a double overtime setback. Volleyball is 21-4 with a 12-match winning streak to win the Sun Belt regular season. Lauren Steinbrecher was named Sun Belt Coach of the Year. The Volleyball Dukes owned the 20th best winning percentage in the nation. Very impressive. Field hockey went 10-7, finished 22nd nationally while competing in 2022 as an independent team. Cross country placed 3rd in the Sun Belt Championship. JMU earned top honors with the Student Athlete Graduation Rate Award for the highest student athlete graduation rate among Sun Belt schools, and also claimed the Institutional Graduation Rate Award for the highest graduation rate among the entire student body at the university. That was very, very impressive. We next turn to the 2021-2022 academic report. JMU athletics continues to excel in the classroom. Posting a multi-year graduation success rate was 89%, which made for the 6th straight year that the strategic plan accountability measure of meeting or exceeding an 85% rating was achieved. The department achieved an average cumulative GPA of 3.048. This was 5th straight year of meeting or exceeding the 3.0 threshold outlined in the university's strategic plan. Academic accolades from this past academic year include 191 student athletes being named to the university's dean's list, and 67 student athletes making the president's list. I think both those are remarkably impressive. We next turn to the NCAA waiver update, a real important topic for the school. JMU is currently working through the NCAA waiver process, which requires an institution seeking to reclassify from FCS to FBS football to go through a 2-year transition period. JMU is petitioning to make the transition in year 1, after 1 year. A petitioning institution is not eligible for FBS postseason play until the reclassification process is complete. JMU has established a timeline in which will hopefully grant waiver approval by the NCAA Board of Directors in August of 2023. We next turn to the fundraising update. We are currently up $84,000 in our annual fund from last year at this time. The Duke Club donor number is up over 850 people and growing each week. Very successful report. The meeting adjourned at 4:02 p.m. Madam Rector, I move that this report of the athletic committee be accepted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next up on the audit report, Vice Rector, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Rector. Everyone's favorite committee, the Audit Committee, convened at 2:47 p.m. on November 17, 2022. Robin, Brian, and BKG from IT reported that a gap analysis for compliance with the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act had been completed, and a new policy and standards are in development to support compliance. The Audit Committee received a written annual report regarding GLBA compliance from BKG ISO as required by the GLBA Safeguards Act. Other compliance work in progress includes development of a HIPAA policy and work on PCI. They also reported on security initiatives in progress and discussed security projects that are part of Reengineering Madison, which we've all been hearing about in our own respective committees. The Management Action Plan status report was reviewed, and all action plans have been completed or are on target for completion. The committee went into closed session to review and discuss internal audit reports issued since our last meeting. And following closed session, the committee discussed a possible change to our committee name, and a recommendation will be made to the Governance Committee for further discussion. Madam Rector, I move the report of the Audit Committee be accepted.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposition? Thank you very much. Finance and Physical Development.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Rothenberger.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The Finance and Physical Development Committee heard the following reports at the meeting on November 17th, 2022. Financial review. The university's revenue and expenditures were appropriate for the first 3 months of the fiscal year. For the university debt review, as of June 30th, 2023, the university will have approximately $377.4 million in outstanding bonds. The university's annual debt ratio is well within the board's established guidelines. There's an assistant vice president for business services search update. That's a long one there. After a nationwide search with 30 applicants, an offer has been made and accepted by Mr. Craig Short. Craig received his master's in public administration from JMU in 2013 and will begin his new position on January 4th, 2023. For the budget requests of 2023 and 2024, the university's 2023 operating budget requests totaled $2.2 million and include funds to support an expansion of JMU's Doctorate of Nursing program, a new information technology degree, and mental health support for students. Lastly, for our capital projects update, a report was given on recently completed projects, projects under construction, and projects in design for both capital and non-capital projects. All projects are progressing according to schedules. Madam Rector, I move the report of the Finance and Physical Development Committee be accepted, please.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Rothenberger. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right. Next, Governance Committee, Mr. Grass.
Thank you, Madam Rector. The governance committee met at 4:30 p.m. on November 17th, 2022, and discussed the following items. First part of our meeting was really focused on enhancing bylaws and processes. The committee discussed the timing of the transition of the rector and officers when they're elected. And the committee will be making a recommendation at the February board meeting for a potential bylaw revision. The committee also discussed clarifications to the presidential evaluation process. Then the committee discussed a recommendation from the audit committee for a name change. They'd like to now be known as everyone's favorite committee. Just joking. The name of the committee will now officially, the name of the committee will be changed to Audit, Risk, and Compliance Committee to better reflect the full scope of their responsibilities. Their charter will be updated appropriately. The committee spent the remainder of its time on planning the upcoming board retreat in early 2023. As we did at last year's retreat, we plan to work with EAB to assist in facilitating. Please make sure your calendars are marked for Saturday, April 22nd for this retreat. I have not heard and told by anyone they have a conflict, so I'm excited about 100% board participation at this retreat. If any committee has suggestions for discussion or review at the retreat, please contact me or a member of the governance committee. Madam Rector, I move the report of the governance committee be accepted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grass. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, thank you. Biting my tongue. All those in favor? Any opposition? All right, thank you. And finally, student affairs, Ms. Tompkins Johnson.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So Student Affairs Committee was pleased yesterday to have sitting in with us. President Alger joined us. Our rector, Mary Beth Garrett, joined us, and Dr. Malika Carter-Hoyt, our new vice president of DEI, sat in on the committee meeting as well. So we started with the approval of the minutes. Next, as the rector did this morning, we read the names of all of the 5 victims from the UVA shooting, and also at Dr. Miller's suggestion, we also had a moment of silence there. From there, we went on to hear the student affairs update from Dr. Miller. He updated us on the last few months on campus, including information on the telehealth initiative, other campus events, and some comments on student well-being here. We heard from Shadi Bakhtiari, our Student Government Association president, who is continuing to work to increase outreach to the student body, keep them informed of all of the meetings, events, and program that she does, and often in conjunction with our student board representative. And she is also working to support new student advocates. The SGA is establishing academic senators and spreading the word about American Sign Language, about the American Sign Language Bill of Opinion to increase the accessibility in ASL classes on campus. We'll be hearing more of that, I think, in future meetings. Our student representative to the board, Xavier Williams, shared with the committee updates regarding the work with academic affairs. Many of the meetings that he has held across the Commonwealth. He was able to visit Rwanda and have conversations with the leadership there and some student leaders there as well. And we commented that he's so very good about sharing all of the meetings he is and keeping the campus and community informed. And he talked about his priorities for the upcoming semester. Our spotlight for this meeting was diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Dr. Brent Lewis leads that team in student affairs, and he pointed out, we often say and talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI, and his area also includes accessibility. So that is now, and they just wanted to point that out, that is now the title of that, the team that works in that area. So it will be diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So that was a spotlight that we heard yesterday. We heard from the leaders and we heard from the student panel. I'll say just a little bit more about that. But we were really pleased at all the reports and the structure that we're going this year with the student affairs committees by hearing from the administrative leadership and then always hearing from students at every meeting. But focusing on the DEI portion of it, as well as the accessibility. Just want to let people know this supports one of the goals in the strategic plan that the community will cultivate, that the university is committed to cultivating a campus climate that is inclusive and equitable. So having a strategic priority tie-in, we really appreciate that. So we heard from Dr. Brent Lewis, Valerie Gant, Lee Dyer. These are all the leaders. Valerie Schoolcraft, they provided updates on each of their areas in the department. The departments create opportunities for students to connect to campus and their peers through programs, dialogues, training, and department services. So if you ever find yourself not committed to a committee meeting, come on and see us in student affairs. And then we heard from the student panel, which we always really just continue to be just to appreciate just the maturity and willingness to be involved of our students here on campus. They shared how working with the departments and using services provided by JMU has made them feel supported and grounded, all while providing them also with a sense of belonging. The meeting adjourned at 2:30. Madam Rector, I move the report of the Student Affairs Committee be accepted.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. And with that, we will move to the President's report.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Great to see you all and a happy early Thanksgiving to all of you. It's great that we still have some students on campus even today. We hope to see some people around tomorrow for the football game as well. So thank you all for being here. I hope what you'll see in my report this morning is the strategic plan in action, and very specifically as we embrace our identity as a nationally recognized research university. Donna? So first, I want to echo certainly what you've heard already around the table this morning in terms of our support for the UVA community. It really has been very difficult for lots and lots of folks all across the Commonwealth. Everybody seems to have connections, of course, to the University of Virginia. We have students here who have siblings that are studying there, just as one example. Our students did hold a vigil this week, and I really want to thank Xavier Williams and Shadi Bakhtiari for their leadership in putting that together on short notice. Wilson Hall, as you see, has been lit up for several days in orange and blue as a sign of solidarity with our colleagues at UVA. And tomorrow at the football game, if you're there, you'll see that our team will be wearing a decal to commemorate UVA and the lost students. And there will be a moment of silence before the game starts. So if you are at the game, please keep that in mind. I think, Jeff, it's going to be about, what, 3.5 minutes before the start of the game. So if you are able to be there for that, let's remember all of our friends and colleagues at the University of Virginia. Now, moving to admissions, I wanted to share some very good news about how things are looking for next year's class. This is work that never ends, as you know, in admissions. So look at these numbers of the students that have applied, and this is the students that have applied early by that November 1st deadline, a 30% increase over last year, which was a record year for JMU. And if you look at those demographics, you see increases in in-state students 25% up, out-of-state 32% up. Now, the next one is rather interesting though, guys. Look at this, 62.2% of the applicants are female. So, we've got to encourage those male students as well. This is, by the way, a national trend that we're seeing in higher education. Look at that increase in first generation students, 17% of the applicant pool so far, a 56% increase, which we're really excited about, and 28% of the applicant pool representing underrepresented minorities. That's a 42% increase. So very, very excited to see those numbers. So thanks to Donna and her entire team. Okay. Now, what happens when students and families come to visit campus? They will be going to Holland Yates Hall, the former Madison Hall that has been renamed in honor of Paul Holland from the class of '82 and Linda Yates, who made the largest ever cash gift to the university, as you heard earlier, which provides scholarships for study abroad, as well as students minoring in entrepreneurship. And Holland Yates Hall really is a gateway to the university in many respects. Of course, it's where the Office of Admissions is housed, global engagement is there, and the graduate school. It has over 60,000 visitors annually. So we're really excited about this transformational and inspiring gift. Next, we have a short video that we want to show you called This is JMU, which really updates our Being the Change brand video that we created a couple of years ago. This is for enrollment marketing. It's also used for athletic spots that are on television and really tries to give a sense and a flavor of the university in a quick snapshot. So Don, I think if we hit the button one more time, the video will play.
After searching for the best college experience, I chose JMU. I found professors who pushed me to excel past my expectations. I forged lifelong friendships. I carried my ambitions from move-in to graduation, and I made it. I bled purple, and I received gold. This choice was truly life-changing. I'm so glad I said yes.
Thank you to the communications and marketing team. Beautifully, beautifully done. So look for that as you see us on TV, and hopefully that will be happening more and more as we go forward. Okay, moving on, as we talk about embracing that R2 National Research University status, one of the immediate impacts on the university was joining the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, or APLU. This is the organization that includes all of the major flagship and land grant institutions around the country, as well as other major public research universities. So very exciting for us to be a part of that organization. They just recently had their annual conference in Denver. We were well represented. We had a team of people from James Madison University covering the spectrum across the university. And very specifically, we had the opportunity on the final plenary session panel to talk about the importance of civic engagement in higher education. And I was honored to be able to be on that plenary session panel. So JMU was welcomed with open arms. We are very much now engaged with national peers on all sorts of issues. So I'm really grateful to all of my colleagues who were able to be there. Next, talking about some research and scholarship highlights. As we are a national research university, it's important to think about the new opportunities that we have available to us. And a couple of examples here you'll see in some meetings that we had recently. We hosted Deetra Trent. Her name may be familiar to some of you. She was the Secretary of Education here in Virginia. She now leads the White House initiative on HBCUs, and she decided to come to JMU to talk about potential collaborations that we might have with historically Black colleges and universities, as well as our ongoing DEI efforts. And so we had a wonderful, robust conversation about partnership possibilities with her. And then separately, we recently also hosted Sean Hearn from the Southeastern Universities Research Association, or SURA. They work with Jefferson Lab in Newport News. Some of you may be familiar with Jefferson Lab. They're affiliated with the U.S. Department of Energy and do some really high-end work, particularly with big data. And that was a part of the conversation that Sean had with staff here to look at some future opportunities to work with JMU and our faculty and students in that area. So some really exciting partnership and collaboration opportunities coming up, again, as a result of that move to R2 status in particular. Now, another area that I wanted to mention briefly, we've been hearing a lot about college costs in higher education, as you all know. And this is something that we're all concerned about. And one part of that is the cost of textbooks and course materials. Students that are here certainly can relate to this, but there are efforts underway to alleviate that challenge. And in particular, I wanted to highlight this idea of open educational resources. Our library has a new department that is supporting faculty in identifying, using, and creating what we call OER, Open Educational Resources. This is a statewide priority. We're working with the Virtual Library of Virginia, or VIVA. They have grants and initiatives, and our folks, particularly from the libraries, are very much leading this effort. We've already saved about $2 million for our JMU students through these efforts, and almost 10% of our courses already are listed as either no cost or low cost in terms of course materials. So, this is a real effort to work with faculty to identify alternatives to really expensive textbooks. So Don, if we could go to the next slide, why does this matter? Well, this is a really interesting study that was done last year on the academic impact of expensive textbooks. So you'll see here, these are responses from JMU students that mirror the responses that we saw across the Commonwealth. And that question was asked, in your academic career, has the cost of required course materials ever caused you to do any of the following? You see down there at the bottom, about 25% of the students said it caused us to take fewer courses, over 30% to not register for a particular course. And all the way to the right, look at that, not purchase the required textbook. Over 60% of the students said they had made that choice. So this is really important. It has an academic impact on our students. So we are really grateful to the library staff for leading these efforts, and to our faculty in thinking seriously about this challenge as we go forward. Another area when it comes to academics, as we think about our strategic plan and the return on investment, is to say, how do we assess student learning outcomes to show that students are actually learning what we say they should be learning in their respective courses and programs. And that effort is led by our Center for Assessment and Research Studies, or CARS, as we call it for short. And they recently were given a very high national award, the 2022 Trudy W. Banta Lifetime Achievement and Assessment Award. This is like the Super Bowl of assessment. It's as exciting as the audit committee, I can guarantee you. And you can see what it does, recognizing distinguished, significant, and sustained leadership. So over time, for assessment and improvement by individuals, institutions, or organizations. Our Associate Director, Dina Castor, I think is with us today. Dina, would you stand and be recognized? Thank you for your leadership. And Dina, please thank all of your colleagues. They do great work, and this is an area in which JMU is a national leader. Speaking of national leadership, another recognition that was received recently on a theme that is near and dear to many of our hearts, and that is entrepreneurship and developing an entrepreneurial mindset in students across all sorts of majors. The Gillum Center for Entrepreneurship won the award for Outstanding Emerging Entrepreneurship Center at the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers. Global. Last year, they were one of the top finalists. This year, they won the award. And literally, there's international competition in this. So the Executive Director, Suzanne Bergmeister, is here, along with Assistant Director, Akil Kanodia. Would you both stand so we can acknowledge your great work? And some of our board members have been very supportive of that work as well. And I want to acknowledge that and thank you for that work. Now, another area as we think about embracing what it means to be a nationally recognized research university is we don't want to forget about the importance of high quality teaching. This is what JMU has been known for generations. And sure enough, that is certainly continuing with the faculty of today. So Dr. Karen Tollefson Hall is here with us. She is the Associate Director of the School of Art, Design, and Art History, the Art Education Coordinator, and a Professor of Art Education. You see that she previously won a significant award in 2012, the Virginia Art Education Association Higher Ed Art Educator Award. This year, the 2022 Virginia Art Educator of the Year. Karen, I think you're here. Would you stand to be recognized? Thank you, Karen, for what you do, and thanks to all of our faculty. This really represents the quality of the faculty that we have across the board, and we're really excited about that, and we don't ever want to forget about the quality of that classroom experience. Now, another important goal that was dramatically affected by the pandemic that I wanted to mention that's in our strategic plan has to do with study abroad participation. You can imagine, obviously, things really shut down during COVID. It really disrupted these efforts. But the good news is the applications now are going very much in the right direction. Students are ready to get back out there and to study internationally. So you see there, the number of applications is up 105 from last year. Students study at all different times of the year, during the academic terms, during winter, during spring break. Of course, the summer is the most popular time, as you see there in the numbers. Now, typically, of course, some of the most popular places you see people still love to go to Italy, the UK, Ireland, but we are increasingly trying to think about the rest of the globe as well. And along those lines, Don, if you could go to the next slide, you've already heard mention of Rwanda, one of our important new collaborations that we have in parts of the world where not every university is. Rwanda is a small enough country. We're actually basically working with their system of higher education. We have a task force that is looking at different types of partnerships with Rwanda and its system of higher education. Mike Davis is here. Mike, would you wave your hand in the back? My chief of staff. Mike and Professor Neil Marin led a trip recently, and as you heard, Xavier was part of that as well, looking at these different forms of collaboration. We had faculty and students from JMU Debate, which is actually how this relationship started, but the College of Education has been represented. Sport and recreation management is another area. There are a variety of different academic disciplines where we're exploring partnerships, looking at memorandums of understanding with universities in Rwanda, and we've already had students here at JMU, and of course, we also want more of our students to go there. I think, is Nelson here today? Nelson, would you stand up? So Nelson Giranchuti is with us. Nelson is our first graduate student from Rwanda and is going to be at the December commencement in the MPA program. So congratulations in advance. Okay. One other theme that you all know is in our strategic plan, and I mentioned earlier, is civic engagement. And again, JMU is known as a national leader in this field. And in the 2022 elections, again, we were well represented here. We hosted forums for local elections. This is something that our students take leadership on for city council, for the school board. JMU Civic, working with our students, created a nonpartisan voter guide where students asked the candidates to share their views on different issues. Many of you probably know we do have an on-campus voting precinct, which is currently located in Godwin Hall. It used to be in the Convocation Center, but of course, that's being renovated. And luckily, we were able to identify another location. And we were one of the institutions rewarded with what's called the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, Most Engaged Campuses in 2022. Again, for our efforts on this front. Coming up next year, we're going to be hosting an International Institute of Civic Studies and Learning for Democracy with other universities from around the world. So I know David Kirkpatrick couldn't be here today, who's leading the center, but I really want to thank David and his team for the great work that they do. Now, we are also, as we just heard, of course, a place of convening. We want the world to come to JMU, just like we want JMU out into the world. And this is one recent example that was really powerful. The SOMOS conference, meaning we are, was on October 28th. And this was a statewide conference about Latinx issues that included faculty, staff, alumni, community members. Chris Falcon was there representing the board. Thank you, Chris, for your leadership on that front. And the keynote address was delivered by Dolores Huerta. I don't know how many of you know her name, which deserves very much to be in the history books. Dolores is a very young 92 years old and gave the keynote address, brought down the House. Some of you may know she worked with Cesar Chavez way back with the United Farm Workers in developing rights for people that work in that field, starting in California, a movement that spread across the country, a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So it was just extraordinary to have her here, and she was absolutely sharp as a tack, telling amazing and inspiring stories to encourage our students to think about what they can do to make a difference. So I really want to thank everybody who was a part of that. Karina Klein-Gable, one of our faculty members, was the organizer, and I really want to thank Karina for her leadership. Now, turning to the General Assembly quickly, as you heard, that season is coming fast upon us here, starting in January, actually even before that in terms of the governor's budget. So you all know our team, Caitlin Reed, who couldn't be here today, of course, assisted by Savannah Funkhauser, and then of course, Charlie King, still with us, working with us on a part-time basis in Richmond with General Assembly. You see the key dates up there. We will see the governor's budget unveiled on December 15th, so coming up soon. And then very quickly after the new year, of course, the session gets underway. So a lot of work to be done in a short amount of time. Okay, Donna? And specifically looking at JMU and what we're doing in the budget. This is the second year of the biennium, right? It's that 2-year budgeting cycle. So if you look at the far right column, you'll see what we've already received in this biennium. Support, of course, for Carrier Library, that significant renovation and expansion. The steam plant renovation, that has already been approved and appropriated. Our teacher recruitment program, the Grow Your Own program, you see got significant funding already, and very significantly addressing the JMU funding disparity, recognizing that on a per student basis, we are funded less than our peer institutions. So those are all things that have already been acknowledged and approved by the General Assembly. But of course, there's always more work to do. So, Donna, to the next slide. These are the specific areas that we've been working on with the governor's office before the session starts. The governor was very clear that there's not going to be a lot of additional money right now. There's a lot of concern about inflation and the continuing uncertainty in the economy. But in terms of key Commonwealth-wide priorities, that is something that the governor's office has said, we do want to hear about things that relate to those strategic priorities. And so here you see 3 of the areas where we've been working with the governor's office, hoping to get these possibly even into his budget. First of all, support for expanding our nursing programs, particularly that doctoral program. These are the people that teach future nurses, and that's one of the critical needs in order to expand these programs. We have a new information technology degree. You may remember that was recently approved by the State Council for Higher Education, but we do need to hire great faculty for that. It's a very competitive marketplace. So we're hoping for some additional support there. And finally, very importantly, the issue of mental health, as you all know, has been a major topic across the Commonwealth. And we've spent a lot of money of our own to get some new initiatives underway with the telehealth services, with Cognito training for all faculty, staff, and students. Now, that last one may end up being something that is Commonwealth-wide, but JMU is the one that led in going to the governor and saying, we really do need support for this. And these services are not inexpensive to offer. So those are some of the key areas that you'll be hearing about. This year, we actually don't have a significant capital project right now where we need additional approval, which is a good thing because there are a lot of cost overruns right now in capital projects. The governor has been telling us the staggering numbers, and some of you may be dealing with this in your own businesses, because of the costs of labor and materials and supply chain issues. So that's going to be in very short supply to see any new capital projects getting funded this session. But these types of initiatives, I think, at least have a chance. So this is what we'll be talking about in Richmond in the next couple of months. Okay, Donna? Something else that the board needs to be aware of, and we want our university community to be aware of, and this is something that happens every 10 years. It's almost like the cicadas or something. And this is SAC-COC. They're our friends, really. But this is our regional accreditor for the university. This is a big undertaking. When you go through this every 10 years, you have to have this regional accreditation for students to get federal financial aid. So it's really important that we do this right. And SAC-COC is known as the most rigorous of all of the regional accreditors in the United States. Many of us have actively been involved with SAC-COC so that we can understand their standards. I have led site visits, as have others at James Madison University. And the way this works is the university first provides hundreds and hundreds of pages of data and information related to standards that affect every aspect of the university. We've had to do that already this year. We have an off-site team that reviews all of that paperwork, and then they identify issues that need further discussion when they come to campus in the spring of 2023. So there were 10 areas that they identified, and then there are a number of other areas that always have to be looked at under federal law as federal requirements. And so that visiting team, which is peers from other colleges and universities from across the country, will be here the first week of April in 2023. And they will meet with many of us, and they may ask to meet with some members of the board because there are some standards related to how the board operates and board governance. So we will be in touch with you as we learn more about their expectations. But this is really important for the university. I will point out that the last time we went through this process, by the time they had completed their on-site review and met with all of us, they made 0 recommendations, which is really, really rare, because I can tell you SAC-COC, there are dozens of standards that you have to comply with. There's a lot of paperwork involved, and these are very rigorous reviews, but JMU historically has done very well. So you'll hear more about this, but we want you to be aware that that is coming. And by the way, one specific piece of this that you'll hear more about later in the meeting is the Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP, that we're required to have as part of our strategic plan and is required for reaccreditation. You heard, of course, already about athletics. I can tell you, Jeff and I and others from JMU were at that Sunbelt meeting recently. And of course, this was our first time at their annual banquet. We were not eligible for any of the sports trophies yet, right? Because our teams had not been in the Sunbelt over this last year, but they started with the academic awards. There were 3. One university got all 3 awards, right, Jeff? And that was James Madison University. I can tell you the other presidents came up to me and said, wow, what are you guys doing? You know, they were on notice that JMU is ready to play, and not just on the field, but certainly academically as well. And I have to say, it was a breath of fresh air to see the conference take these academic recognitions so seriously. So that was a really great moment for the university. You've already heard about, of course, men's and women's soccer, both of them being in the championship game of the conference in their very first year. Volleyball, of course, is competing this weekend in the Sunbelt tournament. They have played their final match at Godwin. They will be in the Convocation Center going forward, as that's been renovated for them, as well as for other athletic programs. And of course, the basketball seasons have already started. The men are playing this weekend at #1 North Carolina. We can do it, right, Jeff? Are you promising a W, Jeff? Or
I won't go like that.
well, we're at least looking forward. The men have been great. The women have a wonderful team as well. So please come out and support them. Okay, Donna? Finally, I have some late breaking news. I was just given this information late last night that we could announce this morning, and that is the brand new Reddix Center for First Generation Students. So 2 of our College of Business alumni, Angela Reddix from the class of 1990 and Carl Reddix from the class of 1988, have made a gift of $1.1 million to support first generation students at James Madison University. This is so exciting. It has been such a high priority for us to provide access and opportunity to this quality of education for first generation students. As you see, the gift is going to name a space as well as establish the Reddix Centennial Scholarship Endowment. We are so grateful to Angela and Carl. And by the way, some of you may have seen their names in the newspaper just yesterday. Angela founded a company called Ardix in 2006, which is an employee-owned company, which is really kind of a neat story in itself, that it's employee-owned. They do healthcare management and technology consulting located in Norfolk, and they are moving and expanding in Norfolk, creating new jobs and opportunities in that community. So we are really grateful for their vision and leadership. So please join me in thanking Angela and Carl for that extraordinary. And Madam Rector, that concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, President Alger. Any questions? Very robust and data-filled presentation. Thank you very much. All right. If there are no questions, then I'm going to ask Tim Miller to come up and introduce our next topic, which is the University Career Center and Career Outcomes presentation.
Good morning. I will be incredibly brief because what's important is to come, not me. I'm really proud that our University Career Center team is here, and that Dr. Miles Fred is here to talk to you about not only the work of the University Career Center, but the career outcomes report. For several years, you all have seen these over and over again, and our hope is that every year we will be able to bring this to you and show you what our team does with our students while they're here to help prepare them for the future, but also how amazing that data is on the back end and what our students are going out into the world to do. So with that, I will cede the floor to Dr. Miles Surratt, and I hope you'll enjoy what he has to share, which is very good news.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I feel fortunate to be before you this morning, as Dr. Miller mentioned. My name is Miles Surratt. I'm an associate vice president here at JMU, and I'm here to talk about the career development work that's happening at the university. So I am really here representing the work of the University Career Center, and these are exceptional educators. And I will share, and I hope that this comes through, the work of career development is happening throughout the university. I'm here representing the Career Center, but much of the data that I'll share today is a collective effort. But these are really wonderful folks, and I wanted to introduce my colleagues. So Libby Wesley, the director of the Career Center, is here this morning, as is Colleen Waller, who's our associate director. Laura Hickerson is also here, who's an associate director. And then in the corner over there is Sarah LaFrance, who's an assistant director who works on our assessment efforts. So as Dr. Miller mentioned, we can flip to the next slide. I do have great news to share. This is really wonderful information, and I think I hope this will be new information and sort of an expansion of how we understand the career placement of our graduates. So what I really want to focus on today is what JMU is doing to prepare our students for the workplace, and then what JMU is doing to prepare our workforce for the Commonwealth. I have, as you can see, I'm going to go through 4 sections here. I don't think this, I don't know that I need to give you this permission, but feel free to stop me and ask questions at any time. I will be pausing at the end of each section to stop and take questions at that time as well. Each one is fairly distinct. I'll be starting talking about the specific work of the University Career Center. We'll then transition to the career outcomes data, and I'll talk in some detail about that information. And then I'm going to share some really wonderful information that came out of SHEV last year. And then we're going to talk about specifically what JMU is doing to meet the needs of the Commonwealth in terms of work. But I would not be a student affairs professional if I did not pause for a moment and have a brief discussion with the group that I think will be helpful transitioning into this. So if y'all would be so willing, our wonderful board of visitors, if you could share with me what was important to you, if you can think back, could be just a few years past, or it could be more than a few years past, into what was important for you in finding your first job after college. And then as you think through those answers, if you could, if anybody is willing to share, that was a few years ago.
I would say for my first job out of college was finding the right boss that would invest in my growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have,
I could say, and he's still a friend today, so it worked.
yeah, finding the right fit and the culture that's going to be supportive.
Seeing that I'd had some practical experience outside the classroom as well.
Yes, that practically.
I was interested in finding a job that was going to leverage what I learned. So
Yeah, I'll mention that here in a second as well. Well, thank you all for sharing. So, Donna, if you don't mind. So I'll start with talking about what the Career Center was doing last academic year. So as you can see in 2021, out of the Career Center, there were almost 13,000 engagements. So that's students coming to events, meeting with folks, and that reached over 7,000 students. We did that primarily through 3 strategies. So you'll see classroom presentations, career fairs, and then one-on-one career advising appointments. And those career advising appointments can run the gamut in terms of could be something just like a simple resume review, or it could be, I like to refer to the University Career Center as sort of the epicenter for students' existential crises. So I don't know if I want to do this live. Let's sit down and talk. There are additional things that are happening outside of those primary strategies. So you'll see networking events are really prominent. We do a lot with the Alumni Association and have really great partnerships with key stakeholders like Women for Madison. And then we also have liaisons assigned to each college. So there is college-specific programming. Some of that is fairs. So like with Bob Culver's team inside, we have a really successful partnership on a fair specific for that college. But it's also things like having advisors in the space of the college. And then Creative Careers Week is a good example of the kind of large-scale programming that can exist. This spring, there was a week-long program in partnership with the College of Visual and Performing Arts to really highlight alumni connections and have programming on campus and a variety of ways that students can engage.
So I'd just like to point out, I was noting to our president that the advising appointments represent almost half of a graduating class, if you think of it like that. And I know that they're not all seniors. I mean, I would anticipate that they're not all seniors, but that's still a pretty impressive number that such a large representation of the population would be taking advantage of your services, which I think says a lot to how well you have been able to provide them.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and a lot of time, energy, and effort goes into that. To have over 2,300 students come through and have individual meetings with the staff. It is a big effort, and it makes a really big difference. And I'm going to highlight and sort of put in student words here in a minute, sort of what that experience looks like. Any other comments? Okay. So I also wanted to highlight things that are happening to make careers more accessible to our students and how we're reducing barriers to make that happen. So one specific program that is a permanent thing this year and a really great transition that I'm thrilled is happening is that we have a permanent career closet in the University Career Center space. So students can come and get free professional attire. This is something that has sort of been a traveling or a sporadic thing, and the Career Center really took the lead on making that a permanent resource for campus. You can see that there's obviously a ton of interest in that, and it is donation based. So if anybody's interested in supporting that, Laura Hickerson and her team take the lead on their career closet. The Career Center are also advocates for paid internships and work really hard with employers to any employer that we're talking to, we are talking to them about paying their interns. And we understand that that's not possible for everyone for a variety of reasons, but over almost 90% of the internships that were posted through the University Career Center last year were paid, which I share because I think it is a general consensus that a ton of students aren't, that we're not providing enough paid internships, and there are a lot of options for our students. I'm going to talk in a second about that other 10% and what we're doing to meet that. We also have free headshots, which is an important thing for campus, and then we're also working really hard to increase early access for our students. There's a ton of research to show that the earlier we can get students in and understanding their career development, the better that they are going to do in their process, And so I'm thrilled to see that almost a quarter of the first year class has already engaged with the University Career Center this year, which from this time last year is up 14%. And I also wanted to highlight and get to that other piece. The university has a very sincere commitment. I think we're going to hear a little bit more here in a few minutes about internships generally, but has a very sincere commitment to reducing these barriers and making internships as acceptable as possible for folks. And the University Career Center is absolutely living that commitment. The majority of funds from career fairs every year are earmarked for unpaid internships and are made available to students. And as you can see, over $55,000 were distributed last year, this past summer, for our students, which is, I would say, very distinct and really notable. Most of the time, the funds from career fairs are going to support staffing or support programming. And so this is a really significant commitment that the Career Center has made to increase access.
And how many students would that basically cover? That 55,000, what would that?
Yeah, so last year, I believe it was about 20 students that accessed that. So if you do the quick math on that, it's a pretty significant award. And we did meet everyone who submitted an application last year did get funding. So there's not, I think the more that students know about this, the more that they're going to be seeking it out, and the more that they're going to be seeking out internships, which is something that I think everybody here wants. And so we think that there could be unmet need in the future, but this year we were able to do that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just provided, I think, a good picture of what's happening in the Career Center from a quantitative standpoint. But I think looking at the actual feedback of students, so this is, I would say, very common kind of feedback that we get from those individual advising appointments. And I'll just pause for a second so you can see the actual student perspective in terms of what those appointments were like. All right. So I think when you get the sense of that kind of impact, you understand that though we are very pleased with the kind of impact that we had on campus last year, the department is continuing to reach, because we want, my general philosophy is the folks in the University Career Center are exceptional educators, and I want as many students as possible to be engaging in the educational process with them. And with that in mind, we have to be really sound in our strategy, and we have to be really ambitious in terms of getting to as many students as possible. So Libby and the team at the Career Center set a very ambitious goal for this year of increasing engagement 25% for this academic year. And something that Libby has also really been driving are these 5 ways to be career ready. This is critically important because it's helping from the very beginning of the process in every conversation that the Career Center is having, helping students have a clear understanding about what they need to be doing to prepare. So anytime someone from the University Career Center is going out and talking to an academic class or having an advising appointment, any of those strategies, we are reiterating these 5 ways for students to be preparing for their career. And I think we're seeing really positive returns on that process. So as you can see, the year is off to a really, really positive start. There's a 63% increase in total attendance and a 50% increase in students reached. So we are well beyond the 25% goal at this point. As you can see in those primary engagement strategies, we're up across the board. Some of these are what I would say are a little more inelastic than others. As the rector mentioned a moment ago, individual student appointments, increasing the capacity for that is different than increasing the capacity of career fairs. It's a little bit easier for us, and there's a ton of work that goes into career fairs, but in terms of scalability, you can expect to see more growth there. But we're absolutely thrilled to see this kind of increase for this year. So with that in mind, I promise I would pause at the end of every section if you have questions, and this is my call. Yes.
Do the I can appreciate that a lot of the services that you provide are oriented to current students. Do the services expire or end at graduation? Or do you also provide services to alumni?
We provide services to alumni, and actually, I think a very savvy thing that the folks in the Career Center do that I'm going to talk about when I talk about career outcomes in a moment is as we're trying to gather the data to understand where students are going and how they're doing after graduation. That is oftentimes couched as, hey, we're reaching out to see what we can do to support you, and also, hey, where have you ended up? So it's offering a service and also asking for something back for them. Yeah, so we do support alumni. We actually have a career advisor that works specifically with graduate alumni students. Yes.
So you indicated increase in participation all across, which is great. Congratulations on that. Can you tell us a few of the ways that you are reaching out to the student body?
Yeah, so I think some of this is that career fair attendance has been down, which is probably not a surprise to anybody. And so, you know, we've seen great attendance with career fairs this year. One of those, and I would say, and I mentioned this earlier, are our campus partners. That's a really critical piece. So those partnerships are, you know, included in that 68% increase in career fair attendance is a significant increase, as I mentioned earlier, in the College of Integrated Science and Engineering fair that we have every year. We were way up in attendance there, and that would not be possible without our partners over there. So that's a key piece as well. Another thing that I would say is these things are all mutually beneficial and reciprocal. So when we are in more classrooms, there is, at least last year's data would show that every time that we give a classroom presentation, not every time, excuse me, 25% of the time when we engage with a student that way, we're going to see them in another place. And so what happens is the more that this is happening, it's sort of a rising tide lifts all boats kind of philosophy, which is really wonderful when you think about one interaction with students is not really the goal. We want to be seeing students in a classroom presentation and then they come to a fair, or in a classroom presentation and then they come meet with us one-on-one. And so it's really one of these things where it's sort of a snowball effect. As we're doing more of one, we should be doing more of all of them. But none of that would be possible without really gracious faculty welcoming us into their classrooms and deans who are really wonderful partners.
So with those partners, is it mostly the in classroom presentations, mentions, or are there other things that are going on that those partners or others might be doing? And I asked, one, it's great that you're getting this increase. And then I'm in other places and people are trying to find ways to pull people in. So that's why I'm asking you to get a little bit more on how this has worked so well for you. So is it mostly the in-class, even among your partners? Is that pretty much what they're doing?
I think the in-class and the active engagement is probably the primary piece. We're also thinking about, I think we do a good job in it. I also work with Office of Orientation, and I think we're doing a better job integrating career services into the orientation experience. So Libby gives a presentation to families, and families are really key partners in terms of getting folks into the pairs as well. But you know, some of it is also word of mouth. The more that we are, you know, the more that faculty know us, the more that our peers from around the institution know us, the more that everybody's in a position. You know, I talked to a student into I talked to a student into going to get a assessment review this week as well. So some of it is just, you know, the more public the services are, the more folks are going to seek those out. But I would say that faculty engagement and academic engagement was probably, I think, our biggest area for growth, and I think we've made really positive steps.
Thank you.
Yes.
I do have a question, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this. I believe in the past they had discussed reevaluating the Handshake platform, and are we getting the most success from that Handshake platform, and does there need to be another resource in that area?
Yeah, so we have a couple of other technologies that help support our students. So Handshake is, I would say, the industry standard in terms of in terms of that service, and it does a really good job in terms of any issue that we have with Handshake is the way that our students engage with the platform and not necessarily with the platform itself. It is, like many things, and like Ms. Johnson mentioned, getting our students to access the platform, and that's why it's the #1 thing on the 5 ways to be career ready. If you've got access to that platform, then you're going to have a volume of jobs that you would be qualified for that you can seek out. But we have other technologies that we're using as well to help with simulating interviews as an example.
Thank you.
Did I see that you all are encouraging students to register for a Handshake account when they arrive in their first year?
We are.
That's great.
We are, and I think there are possibilities in terms of how we do that to make that more mandatory for students if we decide and strategically think that that's the right thing to do. But yeah, we're absolutely encouraging them, and I think that first year engagement is a continued emphasis for the department. The more I think that there's a cognitive barrier for students in entering any office space, and so the more comfortable students are with our staff in the career center, the more likely they are to come back. And so the earlier that we can get them, the better. And we're going to continue to put new initiatives in place for engaging students. Any questions? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to move on to the career outcomes piece. So I think what I hope everyone will walk away from this experience knowing is that our graduates are doing exceptionally well. And I think it's very, very hard to find a way to think that they're not. This data is pretty overwhelming, and I'm really thrilled to share it with you. So if we can go to the next slide, I'm going to do a little bit of terminology just to make sure we're all on the same page, because there's an industry word here that you all may be familiar with, but is not totally known. And this word is outcomes. So an outcome is where students are within 6 months of graduation. What are they doing? And that 6-month standard in this language outcome is both normed by our professional association, the National Association for Colleges and Employers, but it's also the same standard and the same language used by the Department of Education. So a student is referred to as having a career outcome if they are doing any of these things. And a student does not have an outcome if they are doing any of these things. So still seeking employment, taking a gap year, not seeking employment. And so generally speaking, everyone was hoping to have higher outcome rates. So with that in mind, I am so happy to share that, if we can flip to the next slide, that almost 96% of the degree recipients from the class of 2021 have a career outcome. And I'm going to get into this in more detail here in a moment, but as you can see, a little over 70% are working, almost 23% are continuing their education, some are serving in the military, and then you can see the breakout there for advanced degrees. So bachelor's degree is on the left, advanced degree is on the right. So we've got 4.4 that are without an outcome for bachelor's, and only 1.9 for advanced degree recipients. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide because I think that it's helpful to understand that within context. So I think we can probably all understand that 96% is good, but I'd like you to understand how good that is here. So you'll see the class of 2020 across the board, important to know, not a surprise to anyone, huge dip in outcomes for everybody except the University of Virginia, which I'll talk about more in just a second. So as you can see, the national average was a little bit lower. Our two averages were definitely lower, and JMU's number was lower in 2020. Still better than our peers in most cases, but a little bit lower. So fast forward over to 2021, I'm thrilled to report that we have had a huge bounce back in terms of outcomes, but that's also part of the national trend. So you'll see in 2021 here that the national average was a little under 84%. For R2s, it was 87.5%, and then in context, here is our 96% number. So way above average nationally across the board. And within the Commonwealth, you will see that JMU's numbers are at the top of the class. And this is, I think, very helpful to understand exactly how well JMU students are doing after graduation. The data isn't available for UVA yet, and there may be a temptation to think that that will be higher, but UVA's numbers are sort of odd. They were higher in 2020 than they were in 2019. So I don't think it's a guarantee to say that because they were higher last year that they'll be higher this year. So that's some helpful context that I think is beneficial to know. But if we can go to the next slide, this is broken out by academic college. So I'll give you a second to look at that, but I think
Can I make a comment?
yes.
I think people would be shocked to know that Virginia tax is that low. I don't think anybody in the Commonwealth would guess that at all.
I don't.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think so either, and I think that there's a world in which if they had, in conversations with Libby about this, and Libby's been working on outcomes for many years, some folks just don't prioritize it in the same way. Don't prioritize getting this information and having the full scope of it. It is odd if, and so I would say, I think it's fair from a trend standpoint to guess that Virginia Tech is lower. I don't know that this is what they're reporting. You can go to their website right now and you will see that they will say that they have 27% still seeking. I double checked it yesterday because it is an odd number. That being said, so in reality, I suspect that their graduates are doing better than that. I don't know exactly how much better, and I feel confident based on the trend lines that exist that JMU graduates.
I just think the perception is completely the opposite out there, which is a problem, right? And that's that we get dinged all the time on job placements, and Virginia Tech gets uplifted on their job placements.
Well, and I agree, and something some context I was going to provide later as I talk about Virginia too. Something that I can say with some degree of confidence is that JMU is doing a better job serving the Commonwealth in terms of job placements as well. I actually pulled the raw data on that to try to get the best sense of it that I could, and Virginia, only about 50% of Virginia Tech, in fact 49% of Virginia Tech graduates are then subsequently working in Virginia. So maybe me sharing this information as part of, I can't speak, with much confidence about what's happening there, but I can say that I'm really thrilled with how well our students.
Can I piggyback on that? I'm glad you brought that up, John, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how this ties into one of our strategic goals, which is attracting the students of tomorrow. And you said that perhaps Virginia Tech isn't prioritizing this data. And I think about that tagline that we use about JMU is the #1 university in Virginia for getting a job. And I've often asked, well, why? Is anybody asking why are we having that outstanding outcome? Is this a priority for students when they're coming in, for example, a choices day? Is this information that we think it's worthwhile broadcasting or getting a louder megaphone on all of these statistics in a way that won't drag people down with too much information, but in a way that's appealing to possible students to say, oh, I'm going to have a great possibility of coming out of school with a job if I go here versus some other place. I don't know. Is it a priority when it comes to?
We use it.
We use it.
Okay. Yeah. How do you use it?
When we're talking about fairs, I mean, we verbalize a lot of this. And then enrollment marketing works with us too in terms of how we promote it. But we've used the #1 in Virginia for getting a job.
I know we've used that, but have we used the specifics about
We just got all this.
You just got, okay, all right, gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know that we've had the #1 for getting a job context was pulled from a pretty detailed statistical report. Like the billboard on the interstate is true, but it is also like, that's the best way to describe it. But this is probably potentially a better way to describe it in terms of the context and totality of that. I think it is important to know how well our students are doing after graduation. And I think I hope that this will be a part of that conversation. Yes.
Can you just go back one slide? I know you had the source of the data, but I couldn't read it. how do you get this data? Do you reference it to like IRS data or is it just surveys, it's self-reporting?
How do we get our data, or how do we get the data about our peers?
Where is the original source of this data? Whether it's you get it from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or like, if you just get it from them, where do they get it?
Yeah, so the top chart is from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So we all report our data to them and then they aggregate this. So their 2021 data came out, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago.
So their data is coming from you.
Yes, their data is coming from us. Everybody individually reports their own data. So you can go, and the way that I found this out is everybody has their publicly available information. Obviously, as I mentioned, Virginia's is not available right now, but you can just search for Virginia Tech First Destinations Report. That's the technical name for this First Destinations Report. And then you pull it up, and just like we do, I mean, if you go to our website now, you'll find our by college breakdowns, you'll find all of it. And so that's where that data came from. In terms of how we got our data.
Yes.
Well, Caitlin Reed has been sharing this information in Richmond, and she referred to it as, glibly as blood, sweat, and tears. But it's a lot of really hard. The University Peer Center is the key driver in that. But it's also, again, partnerships on campus. Some colleges have exit surveys and share that data with us, but primarily it's by sending out a survey to students. And we're in the data collection process right now for the class of 2022. And we do that strategically. We found that an email from Dr. Tim Miller students tend to respond to that, but we also have worked to send text messages as well, which we've gotten really high response rates. But our process of gathering data is pretty labor intensive in terms of the amount of time it takes. We try as much as possible to get the data directly from the alumni to help us understand it, and then we report it.
Do you have to get a certain response rate before it's considered valid?
Yeah, so the NACE standard is 65%. The average for the national average is 55%. The R2 average is 52%, and our rate for 2021 is 74%. So we're above average. We'd like that to be higher if we can, and we'd also like our process to be a little bit less labor intensive as we can. But yeah, so that's the. Yes.
These statistics are really impressive, especially as relative to these other peer institutions. Do you have any insight though into the slide prior to this? Mac, you have one more. You kind of showed the definitions, right? So, a student ending up in a part-time role feels, lower quality, less impressive than a full-time role in the career of their dreams. Is there any kind of sort of qualities, breakdown of this? It was surprising to me to see a part-time position count, equally as a full-time or military or something like that.
Yeah, so I don't have that with me right now, and I guess the question generally is like, are JMU students perhaps underemployed compared to peers? And maybe that's what's represented. And I don't know that for sure. Folks have varying degrees of, as I mentioned, like Virginia Tech had like granular data that I could pull and look at to verify what I was sharing earlier. William & Mary, on the other hand, just has a one pager, so it's not as detailed, and I didn't keep track of that. So there is a possibility relatively that there could be some likelihood of more JMU students being employed part-time, but I haven't seen anything that would indicate that.
So I guess maybe to just understand the data slightly more, if a student or if a graduate 6 months in is a part-time bartender, would that count as they're now kind of, as a success? Okay.
That would count as them having an outcome. Yes.
But Miles, we might just want to add, though, we have looked at salary data as well, and I think that answers Jeff's question in part, because that's actually pretty strong across the board from the different colleges. So I think that's a pretty good indicator. And at least the numbers I've seen, it looks like most of them have to be full-time, given those averages.
Yeah, the median bachelor salary for the class of 2021 was $59,900. So there's
How much was that?
$51,900 is the median salary for bachelor's. Let me double check. I think advanced is $33,000. Advanced degree.
So that's not the bar.
So that, they are,
Median, not
they are doing well. There could be some, there could be some measure of that in the data, but I don't think
fair
it's
number
a.
at the bottom.
So is what you're saying, John? That there is data that compares median incomes of these graduates, because, 96% or 98%, if it's not a living wage, is not, an optimal outcome.
Mhm.
But is there data that compares apples to apples, between these Virginia universities, what the median incomes are?
Folks will report that, and I don't have that with me today, but I can get that to you. What I think what I would share is that I do, and I could have brought that into this presentation, but I am going to talk later on about how proud I am of the number of teachers that we're placing. And so I think that just as an example, I think that it is complicated. Salary, I think, is a helpful context, and it's probably good to know that the average wage is $51,900. And Chris Orman and his team put together a salary study a few years ago that showed that I think something like 12 or 15 years in, the average wage for a bachelor's degree recipient from JMU is well over $100,000. So our graduates are doing well financially, but I do think if we're going to laud the number of teachers as an example that we're educating, we can't necessarily look at salary as, as the defining characteristic. From what I've seen, I would tell you that at UVA and Virginia Tech, those average salaries are a little bit higher than that. So that, I think that is some context, but
Miles, so we might add that there are other measures like student loan default rates, and ours is very, very low. And that's obviously an indication that students are doing well enough financially to pay back if they did have student loans, but we're way below the national average. There is just one example of another data point.
And I think some of the SHEP data that I'm going to get to in a second speaks to how our students are feeling long term about the value of the degree and how the degree is helping them meet their goals. All righty, so if we flip back ahead to the by college data here, I think the main thing to share here is that you will see that this is not a fluke or that one college is carrying while other colleges are not doing well. All of our colleges are doing extremely well in terms of job placement, and I think that speaks to the value of all JMU degrees, which again is, I think, a thing to feel really positive about walking out of the room today.
Can I ask a question on the education and the continuing? Will that change with the transition to the 4-year education?
It will, yes. So I actually,
Because that's a high number.
yeah, noting that as an outlier, I spoke to Dean Lefrance to make sure, and he's happy to answer any questions about that. I don't think it's here, but and the provost may be able to step in on it. I can answer that. So this is about the licensure requirements in the state. So from what I understand, there's 43 different licensures. Some require 5 years, some require 4. There is a movement, I know, of special education and elementary education. We've already shifted to 4 years. And so Dean Lefrance has assured me that we are going to see this shift towards more working and less continuing education going forward. But that is the nature of the licensing process. So let's keep going. So this is the US map in terms of where students are placed to get a sense of the national footprint that JMU has and how our students are thriving and doing well in a variety of communities around the country. The figure here on each state is the number of folks in the class of 2021 that are in each one of those. And if we go forward to the next slide, I think you'll see a lot of the action here is in the Mid-Atlantic. So you can see the majority of our students are working in Virginia, but there's a spread throughout here. I think some helpful context to know is that this is working in Virginia. So this is 60% are working here in the Commonwealth. But I think anybody who knows, I lived in DC for 5 years, anybody who knows the fluke of the way life in the DMV works, we've got 7% that are working in DC. I've seen a study that 70% of the people who live in DC who work in DC don't live there. So a heavy proportion of those folks are in Virginia, given that probably many of them came from Virginia, and that very well may be true of Maryland as well. One other note that's not included here is we got, I think 3.4% of the class is working fully remotely. And so those folks may be in Virginia as well. So this is what we know where folks are working. In terms of where people are living, I think you can imagine this number is probably, hard to say with confidence, but maybe closer to 70% have stayed here in the Commonwealth. All right, so if we, here I will pause. I know we've already had several questions about outcomes. Any other questions there? All right, so the context here is that recently Chev put out a study to understand, so we have a sense now of the kind of work that is going into developing our students for the workplace, and we have a sense of how our students are doing immediately after graduation. But I think another piece of this arc is how are our students valuing their degree long-term? How are they living their life long-term? And so Chev actually wanted to understand that better and put out a longitudinal report that that sampled from the classes of 2007 to 2018 about how they were feeling, I would say generally in life, but about the value of their degree. And JMU fared remarkably well in this. So Donna, if you can forward that, you will see that almost 79% of JMU graduates shared that they felt satisfied with their life. This was number one of the 24-year public schools in Virginia. So it's wonderful to see that our students are thriving after graduation and doing so well. We can go to the next slide. You'll see, and I think this gets to some of what we were talking about earlier. 78% of JMU graduates say that they're satisfied with their long-term career goals. So the jobs that they're placing into, they are feeling like they are successful in that at a really high rate. And that is second amongst Virginia four-year publics. I think a little bit of a note here is that for this one and the next statistic, VMI is a curve breaker here, and I think that is due to the nature of the very specific kind of career preparation that is happening at VMI. So if not for VMI, JMU would be number one. And then if we can go to the next one, you'll see that 78.4% of JMU graduates are satisfied with how their institution prepared them for the workplace. So I think, and again, I hope that the whole arc of this, again, we can work through the details of this, but it's very hard to look at the whole arc of how JMU is preparing our students for their careers and not feel really encouraged. And again, our friends from down in Lexington are the curve breaker here. So JMU would be second in this context. So that's the data. That is the data from Chev. Any questions about that? And there are a few more items on the scale, which I thought about sharing with you, but JMU does exceptionally well on those as well. They just weren't as directly career related. They're more about general education and that sort of stuff. So, all right, so I will conclude with talking about preparing a workforce here for the Commonwealth. So if we can go to the next slide, you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, that 60% of bachelor's degree graduates are working here in Virginia, and that number is even stronger for our advanced degree graduates. Those folks are placing all over the state. So Donna, if you don't mind advancing that. So you'll see that 48.4% of them are in Northern Virginia. Central Virginia is Richmond and Charlottesville. And then the Shenandoah Valley, we have a lot of folks that are working here as well. And then folks throughout the state. So we've got, so JMU's impact is not concentrated in one specific region, but is really benefiting and helping support the whole Commonwealth.
Can I ask a question about Hampton Roads? Because that seems low.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the student body comes from that area? If maybe you don't know that.
I don't know either. That's a good question. We can track that now.
No, it's not that big of a deal. I was just curious.
Yeah, same one.
Seems really low.
It says 10.8%.
Oh, well, there you go, Xavier, with the data. Mhm.
Yeah, so 10 point.
That's not very big. That's
Yeah, we compete with ODU and CNU in that area, so.
Okay, so, and you'll get a sense here that JMU is filling really vital needs all around the Commonwealth, with many of our most important employers. So you'll see 25 plus hires here. One note, if you do feel the desire to Google any of these and look, you will see that the university is oftentimes the #1 employer of its recent graduates. I haven't seen that. I think that's true of every university that I've looked at. So you'll see really critical needs there. I wanted to focus on, and I'm going to highlight here 2 specific areas, which are specifically healthcare and teaching. So if we can go to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, there is amazing work that happens all around campus to prepare teachers to go out into Virginia. And so in the class of 2021, you will see that, and again, this is only us having knowledge of 74% of the class, so it very well may be higher than this, but at least 224 graduates from the class of 2021 are in the classrooms this fall, and that's over 80% of JMU graduates who are teaching. So we are not only producing a lot of teachers, but we're also retaining those teachers here for the Commonwealth, which I think we all know from a lived standpoint how critically important that is. And then we can go to nursing as well. So we have in the class of 2021, about 65% of nurses have stayed here that we know of, and that's 95 total nurses. So meeting a really important need. I did learn from Caitlin Reed yesterday that JMU produces more undergraduate nursing majors than anybody else in the Commonwealth, which is really wonderful. And I think hits on a trend that I would share of President Alger oftentimes speaks about JMU being a national model of an engaged university. And I think this is exactly what that looks like. JMU is such an important part of the economy of the Commonwealth. So I'll conclude with this last slide here and just circle back. So career development work at JMU is resulting in exceptional outcomes for our students. They are absolutely top of the class, placing into jobs. We're also seeing once folks are in those jobs, they are more satisfied with their life than their peers. They're achieving their goals like they want to, and they are feeling prepared for their career based on their degree preparation. And then you'll also see that JMU graduates are filling really vital gaps here in the Commonwealth. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that are still out there. Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned that you work with the Alumni Association. Have you done any tracking of data that connects internships that have resulted from alumni networking or jobs that are related to that? Just thinking again about recruitment and thinking about the power of an alumni network and thinking about specific schools that are known for having that powerful network.
I don't think we have that data yet, but I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. And I know anecdotally our alumni association, our alumni network is a huge part of the secret sauce that has resulted in these great outcomes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that statistic that we're over 80% when it comes to keeping our teachers here in state. I know that I may sound like a broken record sometimes, but our teachers in Fairfax County are abundant. My son's first grade teacher is a JMU Duke, and there's a number of JMU teachers within the school systems, but they are some of our greatest ambassadors. So that's an excellent statistic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. We should all feel very proud of the work that's happening in the College of Education and the kind of responsiveness that they have to the needs of the Commonwealth and everything that they're doing to try to produce as many teachers as they can. And anecdotally, I've worked at other institutions, and there is such a culture of education at JMU. I know so many education majors, and they are not only contributing after graduation, but they're a huge part of the positive campus culture that we have here.
Just a comment on healthcare, because that's where I work. I think JMU is such a critical resource for education and for healthcare. So I really do applaud you expanding the doctor of nursing programs and all the others. Really do appreciate it. A question I had on internships, and it's just because I don't know. Could you, maybe not now, but at some time in the future, map out where are those internships now and where would you like them to be? So we could see where the gaps are by education school.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think we're gonna continue. I know there's an internship task force that I think y'all are gonna hear from here in a minute, but also, I think it is absolutely an institutional priority, and I feel confident when we're talking about this in the coming months and years, we're gonna have incredible data there, and I think that that's a great way to go.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, well, thank y'all for.
Yeah, well, I
John.
go ahead.
I just wanted to add one quick note for the board members. I think that the data about the students staying in Virginia is really important for board members to be aware of as we go forward. I can tell you, when we're meeting with folks in Richmond, it's one of the questions we get from the governor, from members of the General Assembly, because it's one thing to educate all these students, but if they all leave the state, it's not necessarily benefiting the Commonwealth. And when you see there that over 60% of the undergrads, and what was the number, Miles, of the graduate students? It was
74.5.
74.5. So, you know, the overwhelming majority of the students are staying in the Commonwealth and are taxpayers in the Commonwealth. And specifically, when you think about areas like teaching and nursing, when we are meeting with businesses that want to relocate, possibly looking at Virginia, things that they really care about are the quality of education and the public schools and the healthcare system, right, Terry? So, you know, the fact that we are contributing heavily in those areas actually is contributing to other types of businesses looking at the Commonwealth in a positive way as well. So I think it's good for us to be armed with that information as you talk to people, to say, look, these JMU alumni are staying in Virginia, contributing in Virginia as taxpayers, and providing vital services that make it a more attractive place to live and learn and work. So it's really good, I think, for all of you as you talk to people to be aware of that data.
And I think another way to think about that is that based on enrollment size and the number of students from Virginia that enroll at JMU is placing more graduates into Virginia than any other four-year school. So that's another way to think about it. There are more JMU graduates living and working in Virginia than any other school.
And I'll note, to wrap this up for you all as well, Miles and his team have provided you each with a coffee table book that they're going to walk around for you to just sit around and read at your leisure. With a lot of the details.
Colleen, can you all just leave them on the table and go past them? Thank you. Thanks.
So my comments very similar to President Elders, that having just attended the Chev board orientation, the data that you just presented was something that they've highlighted as key areas of interest for boards to pay attention to. So the data is very, very timely. I think it also does speak to some of the issues and concerns that the governor spoke to at that orientation regarding the retention of graduates in the state of Virginia. I also personally feel very strongly that, you know, the product of this university is people who can go out and have successful careers. And I think this data speaks to our ability to do that and to do it better than our constituents in the Commonwealth, which is something we should continue to be proud of. The other data that I think is also as important is not only the attracting good students, but retaining them. So our partnering that with, are we able to get them through in 4 years, and then can they get jobs and be successful in their careers and satisfied in their careers? To me, just speak to, you know, why JMU is such a great institution. So thank you. The data is really, really helpful to help us be really good advocates.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Well, thank you all for the time.
All right, very good. Next up, I'm going to ask Heather Coleman to make an introduction to the Quality Enhancement Plan update.
Very briefly, we are very proud to present some updates around our QEP. This is Paul Mabry, who is leading this team along with Jonathan Stewart from Student Affairs. Are you there? And I don't have much more to say than that, except you're going to really appreciate the new
Thank you and good morning, and really excited to be here today providing an update on behalf of the Quality Enhancement Plan Working Group.
which is represented. It's a cross-divisional effort across the entire university, not only student affairs and academic affairs, but representatives from advancement and communications and marketing and all of the and admissions in different places across campus. And thank you, Madam Rector, for your comments earlier about not just the success of students in getting them here, but also the retaining of our students here at JMU. And that is what the quality enhancement plan is really focused on, is how is it that we can increase our retention rates and identify and close equity-based retention gaps. And so with that, on the screen here, you'll see these are the percentage rates of our retention here at JMU. When we're talking about retention, we're talking about of an incoming cohort. So let's say, about 4,800 students are the incoming first year class. What is the percentage of those students who stay at JMU for their second year? What is the percentage of students from that incoming cohort who stay their second year? And so you can see here on the screen at JMU, and this is not uncommon, we are among the leaders both within Virginia, within our peers, within our new R2 peers as well in terms of retention rates. And so you might look at 89.2, a retention rate seems pretty good, and most in the country would be envious and would spend millions and millions of dollars at their institution to try to get a rate that high. But for us, while it is high and it is an envy of many, it still reflects an opportunity for improvement, both as a commitment to our students, as a marker of excellence, as an institution, but also as a place for us to sort of compensate for some loss revenue as well. One of the things that I know that we shared at the last board update that we did was a figure that I think staggered many, which was how much does lost retention cost JMU in terms of revenue dollars? And you'll be surprised to know that for every 1% of retention rate loss or gain, that represents about $2.4 million. 0.5% is $1.2 million. And so there are numerous reasons why we are concerned for the declining trend in retention rates. Now, again, JMU has done amazing things over the years to try to keep students here, and we are doing a great job. And this is a trend not inconsistent both within Virginia and nationally as well. But this is part of our quality enhancement plan and an effort as part of that 10-year SAC-COC accreditation cycle. And so you'll see the slight blip there in 2020. We believe that blip, and this is something that we presented on last time as well, was due to some of the changes in academic policies during COVID, the change in credit, no credit policy, the change in all but stopping with our academic related suspensions and probations, and also some of the changing students, or some of the student enrollment of students who decided to not attend JMU because of COVID or withdraw during the COVID process. On the next slide, these rates will be represented on the side in the red. So you can see here, not only is it about retention overall, but specifically which students and which student populations are experiencing different retention rates. So on the side, you have the overall retention rates and some of the equity gaps based on student demographic data that we've identified on the screen. Our first-gen students, our out-of-state students, Black students, Hispanic students, our transfer students, and our Pell eligible students, which is often used as a marker for socioeconomic status. Again, to reiterate the importance of this as a commitment to our students, and just I think a theme throughout today's board meetings and the presentations you've been hearing is the students to come. How are we not only attracting the students to come, but how, as we're getting more diverse student admissions applications, right? We saw an increase in first gen, out of state, underrepresented students. How do we get them to stay here at JMU? And that's really an important concern and part of the reason that this is a core element of the quality enhancement plan and of the system that we're trying to design to really identify those students and help those students better meet their goals, whether they be grade related, career related, connecting with undergraduate research related, study abroad, whatever it is. And so you can see again, those gaps have fluctuated throughout the years, but do seem to be growing as well. So we have a declining retention rate. We have some growing equity-based retention rate gaps. And what we're proposing and recommending and will implement, pending SAC approval, is an early student success system. An early student success system tries to leverage data and technology to identify students prior to them not meeting their goals. You'll notice a shift in language. The last time we might have been talking about raising alerts about a student who might be at risk of failure. Well, that's a component of that, but that reflects a very reactive, a very negative, and a very deficit-based approach to thinking about students holistically and thinking about students, what do they bring to the table at JMU? Because it's not just students who might be struggling in the classroom, it might be students who aren't feeling like they're challenged. They're not, they came here to do this and they're not quite there yet. How can we help them better get that internship to get them an edge on the career market or whatever it is that they might have as their goals? Pause, I don't know, questions? Okay. Next, we'll present to you the process, and just again, this is intended to be a brief update about where we are in the design process. We'll end with the actual early student success system that we are proposing as our first draft, our first phase of that system. But these are some of the checkpoints along the way, some of the evidence, the framework, the values. And so a couple to hit on here are, again, already mentioned an empowerment framework. It's using evidence, trying to understand based on the data. The data is not just quantitative data, it's not just retention rates and grades, but it's also qualitative data, data from focus groups, from students, faculty, and staff, from check-in surveys, from comments that students are leaving when they leave the university through the withdrawal process. And then also want to mention the individual and systems approach. One of the things that we have heard loud and clear from the board and from our focus groups is that one of the things that has made JMU unique as we've grown is we have somehow managed to keep this small campus feel. This, growing from a small teacher college to growing to now a R2 nationally recognized university. Well, how is it that we still have those high retention rates, graduation rates, career placement rates? It's been that small feel. It feels like a small campus, even though it's fairly large. Well, that's something that we want to maintain while simultaneously trying to understand from a systems-wide approach, how can we understand at an aggregate level, at a student population level, at what's going on in different places or pockets of campus. And that's one of the an important part of the framework here. And on the right hand of the screen here, you'll see it's one of the models that is often circulated in terms of understanding like maturity models for the use of data and data analytics. And going from descriptive, being able to present basic frequency rates of statistics and data, all the way through like diagnostic, what can you infer about a particular student population or set of data, to predictive, which is really hot right now all across sectors, which is given what we know about prior data sets, can we predict something? Can we predict these types of students will want to come to JMU? Can we predict based off of athletic team performance, who will succeed in this given matchup? So really the sweet spot, I think, for us is this prescriptive mode of analytics, which is how do we provide just-in-time support to students based in the data that we're collecting using the technologies that we have available? How can we say, okay, we know, for instance, these students are not meeting their goals, or this student isn't right here. What just-in-time resources and connections can we provide to help that student be more successful so that a crisis or a withdrawal or a failing of a grade or a not meeting their goals does not occur? Next slide, please. Again, snapshots of some of the data we've collected and evidence that get us ultimately to where we're recommending. So right here on the screen here is a snapshot of when students have left JMU over the last 5 years. So if you were to take all of the students who did not stay at JMU, they came and they withdrew for some reason, when did they leave in their time at JMU? And so you'll see in their first semester over the last 5 years, 664 left in their first semester, 380 left in their second semester. That gets us at about 54% of the students who left JMU over the in the last 5 years. About half left in their first year. almost 82% left in their first 2 years, which is one of the reasons why, although we're focused on retention in general, graduate and undergraduate, all retention, the things that we're going to do are going to help all students, really trying to identify in that first time of transition at JMU, how can we better set up these students for success to better meet their goals? Next slide, please. On this slide is the why. You know, I heard some people asking questions, why is it happening? You know, in the context of career outcomes, how do we get such strong career outcomes? Well, how do we understand why students are leaving JMU? This is one snapshot. This is in the withdrawal process. Students can check a box why they are leaving. And then in the last 2.5 3 years, we've now added an open comment box. And I'll just anecdotally share. There are colleagues and I are part of a data equity fellowship that's across a couple of accrediting region bodies. Colleagues from across the country, when sharing some of this data with them, they were shocked with how great our retention numbers were. 2, they were impressed at the kind of data that we're able to get about students when they leave the university, which is really a credit to some of the systems that are already in place in the registrar's office and the dean of students that most other institutions don't have access to. So you can see at the top, transfer is really big, psychological, fit and belonging, health, personal reasons. This suggests why we're focusing on a couple different kind of categories or factors and trying to understand and identify streams of data that can help us understand when students are struggling in these areas. Well-being, academics, basic needs, and sense of belonging. But it's even more complicated than this. Because in those comment boxes, a student might say, I'm leaving for transfer reasons. And then you look at the box, and it's a story about how something has happened with their family back at home. They can no longer financially afford to be here at JMU. It doesn't make sense for their time, so they're transferring to a local community college to take some credits, and then they intend to come back to JMU. Or a student might say, you know, psychological, but they might say, I came to JMU, I don't really feel like I belong, it doesn't seem very diverse, or it seems to be a very strong party crowd, and I can't find my niche here, I can't find my people, and as a result, it's created real mental health issues for me, and so I'm leaving the university. Next slide, please. Again, this data was echoed in our faculty, staff, and student focus groups, sense of belonging, help-seeking behaviors. On the student side in particular, knowing about the resources, you know, it's like orientation. I'm sure much like girls' orientation to JMU and Board of Visitors, it's just a water hose of information. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed and forget or not know. And so trying to figure out how can we, again, connect them with resources, connecting them with peers, faculty, and staff. And then what we're calling some of these non-cognitive or power skills like help-seeking, knowing to ask questions, being able to manage your time and structure. Those are some other elements that have helped students either be successful or not be successful and leave the university. Next slide, please. And then this is, again, one of the things that I think we're really proud of in the work that our working group has done in collaboration with many of the colleagues in this room and represented here at the meeting today, is that what we're finding here is validated elsewhere. Our campus climate survey that also found sense of belonging an issue, that also found mental health concerns, academic concerns, and the ability to advocate for oneself and seek out help. Also mentioned in the Chev report of what matters most. That's being published, I believe, any day now if it hasn't been already, where they did a survey of college students to find what are the things that really help students succeed or that we need to be focusing on within the Commonwealth. Those 4 areas there, again, echoed in our own research done here at JMU. And then as part of our move to R2 and this national recognition, the Boyer report, which is put out by the Undergraduate Education of U.S. Research Universities, their new big commission report called the Equity Imperative really confirms many of our recommendations in terms of holistic advising, proactive advising, reaching out to students, understanding that equity is excellence. If we want to educate for the students to come, it's about integrating that into our systems. Next slide, please. And then the final element here, which is, this is a 30,000-foot view of what an early student success system looks like at JMU in our first draft, in our first iteration. And so this is something that we are still working the mechanics out on. As we mentioned in one of the early slides, we're doing pilot programs, learning from those pilot programs, collecting data, making iterations, and then trying to scale where it makes sense, learning from others as well as internally here. So if you were to look at the system, think about it as an incoming first-year student, whether transfer or first year. During the summer, you complete what's called the ISIC, which is the incoming student survey attitudes and questionnaire, skills and attitudes questionnaire, which is over about 100 items that get at those power skills, that ask students about their sense of belonging, their time management, their goal commitment. Do you know why you're coming to college? How committed are you to that? Your organization, your ability to manage your time. With that information, we then generate a report. It goes to the student. On that report are links to resources that we have at JMU, both online, in person, synchronous, asynchronous, that they themselves can pursue for professional development. We also send that report to advisors. With that information, advisors can work and have and invite conversations about these elements with them as well. At a systems level, we've identified predictably based off of data from 2020 that if you score as an opportunity on four or on some of those factors, four of those factors, your probability of earning a GPA in your first semester of a 3.0 or higher is only about 50%. If you're strong in all four factors, it's as high as 76%. So we then use that information to prioritize outreach with different offices on campus to those students. In fact, colleagues in our orientation office are piloting a peer mentoring program this semester where they reached out to try to invite those students into this mentoring process. Weeks 2 through 4 doing check-in surveys via email on sense of belonging, academics, basic needs, and well-being during week 2 and week 4. Based off of what we learned in that data, we were able to send students referrals and remind them of resources based off their individual responses. And then also systems-wide, we were able to, in partnership with the Dean of Students Office, have some interventions, some awareness sessions with a particular residence hall about some of the feedback that we were receiving via that check-in survey. Midterm grades, that's information that advisors, faculty, and staff use to help understand how students are doing. Weeks 10 through 15, we learned from weeks 2 through 4. We are now texting students one-off questions and asking them to text us response 1, 2, or 3, and then based off that response, we follow up with them. What was surprising to me is of the 419 students that were part of this pilot, guess how many students opted out of receiving text messages for this early student success system?
0.
I wish it were 0. 9, 7. Which is, we think students will want to opt out if they get these messages. It's been fun. We're texting, they're sending emojis, they're being very grateful and thankful that they know that people at JMU care about their success. End of semester grades. Those are all elements that are things that are happening in time. At the bottom represents elements that are things that are happening constantly as part of any day, any week. One is Madison Care referrals that's run out of the Dean of Students Office. Anybody can submit a referral about a student can submit about themselves, a peer, and the Dean of Students follows up and has a very rigorous evidence-based triage system to understand what that student needs and connect them with individual care. Canvas engagement. Understanding from our Canvas, if you're not aware, is our learning management system. It's what many, if not most, if not all faculty use to engage with students in class. It's where the syllabus might be posted, grades, assignments, discussion boards, videos, back and forth. If a student has 0 engagement on Canvas, we're working with the libraries to generate a report that we get that information, they can follow up. There's context. You might be meeting once a week in class, and it might be expected to not be engaged in that semester. So we're always trying to understand what are the other pieces of evidence and data that can help us interpret whether or not something is needing more referral here, more action. And then finally, changes in enrollment status. When students go from full-time, which is 12 or more credit hours, to below full-time, 11 or fewer, we're working with the registrar's office to generate a report so that we know, so that we can follow up. It may not be uncommon. A student might drop a class and go to 11, but it also could be the case that a student drops to 6. It's because they're starting to struggle in their classes. They're starting to maybe alienate and isolate. And so that's information we want to know so that we can connect with advisors, faculty, Dean of Students, and others to support those students. So again, I know kind of quick, brief snapshot of where we've gone, the purpose of the QEP, and what our sort of initial draft of this early student success is. That's what we have for you today. If there's time, happy to take any questions. I'll also say that you go to our website, you Google JMU QEP. There's more information. There's additional research reports from our institutional data analysis, from our focus groups, other information that you're more than welcome to, and any one of us would be happy to talk with you at any point and field more questions.
You may have hit on it a little bit there at the end, but is there currently a way to get data from professors if students start missing classes to get in line with this?
Sorry, yes and no. The best way for that to happen really right now, well, the best way is for the faculty member to follow up with the student. But you can imagine if you're teaching a 3-3 or a 4-4 load, which is 3 classes a semester, and you have anywhere between 30 and 300 students in your class, it's difficult to manage that. And so we're working on assistance-based approaches. So that's currently where Madison Cares is a process for that, where a faculty member can send off a referral. And it just says, I'm concerned about this student, they're not showing up. And so we have that process that's currently in place, but we'd like to kind of scale that up.
Actually, 2 comments and a question. So first of all, I just want to applaud us highlighting this. You know, in a public board setting, many times the incentive is to not feature things where the trend is down and there's a potential issue. So just, you know, thank you to the university for doing this. Second, super impressed with, you know, the approach that we're taking here, how engaging, how data-driven and proactive it is. So, so really, you know, excited about, you know, us you know, seeing an issue and then jumping on it and really coming up with a thoughtful approach. So, last is just more a curious question. So, in hiring at my company, you know, fit is an important thing that we look at when we're recruiting and interviewing. I'm wondering, you know, do we take some of the learnings from this and pull it back a step further into the admissions process to just try to make sure, you know, of those we're letting into the school, you know, can we help screen, you know, that there is a right fit, right? So they don't come here and then realize it's not and transfer out. Is that part of the thought process, or is that too controversial?
Magic formula for that, it would be fantastic.
But we may learn it from this, right?
There may be things that we learn in terms of what makes a student feel like they have that sense of belonging, and that we can then factor in. We look at their activities in high school, for example, or other kinds of things that they did, and how does that fit with what they want to do.
Okay, yeah, just something that helps that matching process. From there.
Thank you for those. And it's a great question. And as pointed out, it's something that has been discussed, don't currently do, but I think it is something that we can learn from. And in fact, one of the recommendations from the Task Force for Racial Equity is talking about how can we use this information or information like this as part of the admissions process. Not necessarily whether to admit a student, though I guess that could be a process, but especially once students are admitted, how can we help set them up for success prior to starting on day 1 of the university? And that's something where, in talking with colleges and other institutions, they do things like that, where they might have what's called a summer bridge program, or they might have some summer work. And those are some of the elements that we are definitely in discussion about.
One question I have is, looking at the retention rates, is there a difference between male, female? What's the retention rate?
That is a fantastic question. And the answer is yes. Generally speaking, across the board, males are retained at a lower rate than females at JMU, and that's also a national trend as well. And then what's really important to highlight, and that don't have this slide here, but if anyone's interested, one of the first things we did is we looked intersectionally at the data. So understanding like not only male, female, but if you're a male first generation college student, what does that look like? If you're a Black first generation college student and Pell eligible, what does that look like in terms of your retention rates? And we found that the more you overlap and intersect some of these categories or social demographics, the likelihood that your retention rate lowers at JMU. And that's again true nationally as well. And so, but with some exceptions. So like white men who are first generation and Pell eligible, their retention rate is, I think, 2019 was maybe in the low 80s, like 82%, which compared to that 89 or 92% at the time is a pretty significant gap. I want to say one outlier that stuck out was Asian females who were first gen and Pell eligible had a low rate as well at 80%.
which again, compared to the female retention rate at JMU, which is, pretty high, was another one of those significant gaps that we identified.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
A comment on the DEI effort here. I think that sense of belonging, that 10.2%, that would be a measure of effectiveness to me of the DEI program in future years, is getting that, shrinking that. And then as you do your check-in and stays, people feel like they belong and retain. So I commend you for putting those together and hopefully linking that to make a impactful change.
Thank you very much. And because people share that excitement and see that possibility, one of the things that we've talked about is there might be areas on campus who there's no intention right now to re-administer that incoming scale that's done during orientation, but there might be interest by particular programs. We might say, we know that we're doing work on this. Let's see if it's working based off, we have sort of pre-test ground level data as they're coming in. Does your sense of belonging work? If you're working with learning strategies and instruction, does your organization improve as a result of working with our program? So absolutely. Thank you.
And Rector, I know this is the whole purpose of the QEP work, but just, hearing this, it just really makes the point that we're getting the data and seeing what's happening and then using it and putting things in place to make the change and improve. Experiences are very good, right? But we want to do even better and better. So it's just the intricacy of this is pretty amazing.
It's exciting, it's thrilling, it's complicated, it's meaningful work, and we couldn't do it without the support of you all in this room, without all of the leadership, and then with the folks in the areas who are doing this every day. It is really important, and exciting. So thank you.
Tim, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll just add two other things that are sort of feed into this, but they're also just things that we're shifting. One of the things that we've seen this year is we had a number of students who dropped classes, especially first semester students, that dropped them below full-time to part-time. Our policy is you don't get to live in the residence halls anymore once you do that, which we did not do this year. So for example, we had students that went to 11 hours or maybe 10 hours. Our policy, their contract says that they don't get to live in the residence halls anymore, but we've allowed them to remain because that might be all the classes they can handle right now. The other thing that we've done, and we're working with the registrar on this, is also how to notify home when the student changes their enrollment status, and work with Tech Night on this, on what's legally allowed to do. That families should know if a student goes from full-time to part-time, or if a student goes from part-time to no time and withdraws. So these are other moments that we want to make sure we're involving the entire partnership with us, the student, and the family. But we have to think about, why do we have a policy that says in our contract that you have to be full-time to stay in the residence halls? I get why it is at the beginning, but with 6 weeks left in the semester, don't necessarily want to tell a student, well, now that you have 11 credits, not 12, you need to leave. So we made that sort of judgment call this year, but we'll change that going forward. You have to start the year as full-time, but if at some point you drop below, but also I don't know that I want a student in the residence hall with only 1 credit. So we have to have those conversations about where is that new line. But just know that we're constantly looking at these things to figure out what is the right way to do this. You don't want to keep the student just so you feel better about keeping them if they actually need some different interventions. But we have to, with the QEP, but also just in general, continue to look at these policies and processes. Just want to add that.
Thanks, Tim.
I wanted to make a point that if that allowance was not made, then a person would not be able to quit. So what is important to do is recognize things that are not working institutionally, custom fit them to the individuals that we would like to retain. Just want to say that for the good of the order, because I thought what you just said, that's going to be very important. Thank you.
And thank you for highlighting that, because that is also one of the foundations of this work, is understanding. Too often we're thinking the students aren't ready for us. Yeah. But sometimes we're not ready for the students to come. And so that's a really important component of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are no other comments. We have one more item on the agenda, so I'm going to suggest we just continue moving. The internship task force preview, Heather Coleman and Tim Miller will be speaking.
Feel free to stretch for 10 seconds while we get up. We all need to stretch. See that we lost her. No, we did. All right. I'd love to introduce the folks who are co-chairing our internship task force. So you know who we're actually directing this work to. Libby Wesley, of course, Director of the Career Center. Sean White, Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Letters. Steve Whitmire, Associate Dean in the College of Science and Mathematics. They are our tri-chairs of the internship task force. And what Tim and I want to do is give you a brief update on how we conceive of this project and how it's so important for our divisions to keep working together so closely. We're going to focus on the purpose of the task force, its goals, who's on the group, and what our approach is and what the timeline is for moving ahead. So, as you likely remember, this summer Governor Youngkin proposed more than $100 million in new state investments to expand college-level internships and to promote collaborative development of talent pathways. The internship portion of that would add $32 million in new biennial funding to the Innovative Internship Fund, IIF, to scale up paid internship and other work-based learning opportunities for college students with Virginia-based employers. So internships and high-impact practices like internships have long been a priority here at JMU. And they've been a real strength of our campus. We've discussed them in various settings over the years. In fact, the topic came up at the board's retreat this past spring. It's one of the university's strategic plan performance measures. In goal 3B, the university will provide high impact learning experiences such as student research, service learning, internships, and study abroad programs in a climate that fosters intellectual engagement in and outside the classroom. So all of this work aligns with the priorities that we have all set. Currently, there are over 100 internship courses listed in the undergraduate catalog alone. And many graduate programs also offer internships, practicums, and other types of clinical placements. We know our students have many opportunities to find internships through Handshake, which we've discussed earlier today. Our system to help students and alumni find and connect. More than 21,000 internships were posted on Handshake last year, and 2,934 were for locations in Virginia. And we've also heard from numerous employers, alums who are employers, as well as other employers who've reported very positive experiences with JMU interns. So I want to make it clear, we don't have a problem with internships. We're not trying to resolve a problem with this task force. Rather, what we're trying to do is take the opportunity to optimize the coordination of all the work that we're doing and take a close look at any equity gaps that might be there with regard to internship participation, placement, and to ensure that opportunities are available for every single student. Of course, the information that Miles shared earlier tells you a bit about what our internships programs are about. We asked our graduates what internships you may have done while you were enrolled. And last year, of the graduates who did respond, 56% stated that they had had an internship, and more than 25% reported completing more than one internship. And as a sidebar, at our dinner table last night, both the students at our table talked about doing multiple internships, and they are not, sophomores and freshmen. So it's extraordinarily ambitious of them to do that, and very good. So our numbers are good, but they're likely a very low estimate of the internships we offer and that students are completing. There is so much more we want to know, hence the task force, including where students are doing internships, when they take them during a career here at JMU, and the effect of that internship on their JMU education, which is, I think, was also mentioned today. Because the definition of internship varies so widely across higher education, we need to better capture what we mean. What are the wide range of experiences that can be considered when we say the word internship? And what do parents mean when they say that? What do students mean? What do employers mean? What do faculty mean? So that's one of the first tasks of this task force. Let's create and make sure that our definition aligns with what the governor has in mind and what our peers have in mind across the country. It is really critical to keep in mind that many experiential opportunities like student teaching, clinical placement, service learning, practicums, those all fall into the category of internships. And how do we count them? And how do we measure them? How do we assess them? That is the work that this task force is doing. There are very clear distinctions between a credit-bearing internship and a non-credit bearing internship, and between a paid internship and an unpaid internship. You've heard a little bit about that today. So again, the task force is going to be digging into what creates those differences. What are the criteria that we use, and what do we need to do to better understand and support all of our students? So internships happen primarily within the colleges. We've got about 125 faculty who oversee internships, and we wanted to just bring all of that together. But clearly the counting also happens, the student affairs and the mentorship and the support. So this is a true partnership between our two divisions. So who's going to turn over next?
So if you see here from the charge of the internship task force, I will not read all of it. But this is what they have been charged to do. We have the need to define things. We also have the need to find things. And I think one of the pieces that Heather mentioned that I think is really important is that sort of definition and concept. You might have someone say, well, that's not really an internship because it's not these three things. We've got to come together and figure that out across the entire institution. Donna, if you can go to the next one. So I wanted you to have a list of the members of this group, so you can see wide ranging from across the entire university. I think that we need this level of depth and breadth of this group so that we can gather all the information that we need. Again, as noted before, the co-chairs are here, so if there are follow-up questions, we can answer those. But again, really key to pull as many people together as possible. Next one, Donna. So moving forward, I want to walk through the approach and the timeline for this. So we want to, and Donna, I think there's another one. Okay. So I will walk through verbally. So there's multiple initiatives that they're going to focus on. First, identifying work-based learning experiences at JMU. What are all of those that exist? Second, interfacing with employers and JMU students to better understand how they view internships, but also asking those students, what are internships? What did they do that they thought was an internship or not? It is funny, there's this weird, what counts and what doesn't. You're not allowed to call that one, you are, and then there's a debate about it. We shouldn't actually fight about it. If this is an experiential, learning-based experience that you're getting, and I know we want them all paid, but paid or unpaid, that prepares you in many ways for a future, we should be able to, I'm not finding it here in this meeting. But we should be able to count those instead of fighting over why isn't this or why isn't it that. We need to be able to have those be out there and have us capture as much as possible without diluting it by calling everything an internship just because it makes us feel better. We can put a big number on the screen in front of it. It still needs to have a definition we can explain and defend as to why that is the definition. We also want to reach out to other institutions and find out how are they doing this. And we've already started doing a lot of that. But if we can understand and how we view and support them as they're going through it. There are several subgroups that the task force will have. They're going to be focused on different tasks, again, defining terms like we talked about, gathering data. And then the scope of internship opportunities means this is not a quick process, but anyone that's worked with me knows that nothing is a slow process. We will be aggressive. The group is very aggressive in their mindset with this. This is not a 7-year thing that, we'll come back and we'll have to send you an email to tell you about what we did. The timeline of this is by the end of this semester, the task force will finalize the definition of work-based learning experiences. Surveys, interviews, and audits of these experiences at JMU and at various comparable institutions will be complete. At the end of February, the group will have completed both their employee surveys and the additional phases of student survey. The proposal of Chev's innovative internship program round 3 will be submitted by the end of February. And a lot of the task force work will be completed at the end of the spring semester, to include a plan of approaches for helping students reflect on and articulate their work-based learning experiences to employers, recommendations for facilitating connections between students and employers, recommendations for department and college level best practices for facilitating these experiences. We'll also be able to review a preliminary draft of a plan to track students' work-based learning experiences. It's great. Right now, we know they're happening, but we're not currently tracking them, so we'll have a plan. So that is really by the end of the spring semester, much of this work will be done, be able to come back and share with you all, here's where we are and here's where we'll go from here. There's another piece of this too, that one, I think there's just a knowing what all is there. The next stage for me is going to be, how do we work together to create new ones? How do we reach out to you, other people out there in the fields, and find out where are those untapped resources? So first, we've got to find out what is and define it. Then we've got to figure out, okay, how do we increase that? A lot of people have this concept that, oh, because we're in Harrisonburg, we can't do this. You will find that the data does not prove that. The data will prove the opposite, that our students are getting many, many internships home, here, lots of places abroad. And we also then need to go through the process of increasing that option and those opportunities. Please.
Before the task force convened for the first time, I met with Anne Marie Coe from Federal Dukes and also the folks from Old School, particularly Chuck May, to let them know we were doing this project. And both groups were really eager to work with us, to mentor us, to give us ideas, to help shape the project. So just so you know, we are reaching out to other folks on our campus to help.
We're not in a position to answer every question you might have about exactly what's going on right now. But if you want to ask them, we'll see what happens. But really about the process we're going through, and this team's great work. So we'll open the questions.
How did I understand you to say that internships are available to all students, freshmen through?
That is the goal. That's absolutely the goal. Right now, they are very widely available. And again, if it's for credit, if it's required by your degree, that'll be degree specific. And other opportunities exist outside of the degree track. So the goal is to make them available for every single student.
Just a comment from an employer perspective, the internships that are very clear and succinct. This is what's required, that you can hand an employer to say, this is a 12-week internship, or this is a 16-week internship, and this is what boxes you need to check. That really does help make the difference. Because I've worked with some colleges, which it's very loosey, very vague. And then there's another college that comes and gives the employer a packet and is very clear. And we go with the ones that are more succinct and very clear on expectations.
That's really helpful to hear. And I also am very interested in, during that 12 weeks, what is the mentorship? What has been the direction? Who's been guiding? Is it the employer? Is it a faculty? Is it both? Right? So how has that 12 weeks actually built the skills of the person, and how do we demonstrate it, as you've said?
And I'm glad to share with one of you a couple of examples.
That would be great.
Just a quick comment on Terry's point. I think that's really important. One of the things that we've heard loud and clear across the Commonwealth, I know a number of you were at the chamber event back in October, where they were talking about this over and over and over again, with the goal being for every student to have this opportunity, and of course, preferably paid, if that's possible. But one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is that some employers are better prepared than others to accept interns and to give them a meaningful experience, especially small employers. And so I think, Terry, your example of having something that that you could hand to a small employer and say, this is what you need to be able to do, could be very helpful, because we can't assume that every employer knows how to do this well to make it a meaningful educational experience. So I think that's a great suggestion.
It's almost like a checklist. This is what the employer needs to be prepared for, and this is what the student, we need to give to the student. So the expectations are clear, because you don't want a student to go and the employer to be vague and not have a good experience either.
And I would say, the other thing I would say, based on my previous institution, the employer has to be ready to provide an experience for our students that's worthwhile. I remember a couple of times ending internship relationships with employers because they just wanted someone to answer the phones and answer me. And they did not have a good experience there, and nothing against that. I think those are valuable things, but there was no actual interest in the learning and experience of our students. They just wanted another body in their place. I want to make sure our students are getting something of value from the experience. So it's okay sometimes to say no to a place because we know they're not providing a valuable experience for our students. So you go,
I was just gonna ask about the goal is for all the students. How does it work for the students in the non-traditional majors like the arts or music? Are they the same?
Yes, it's the same. There are so many internship opportunities in the creative industries. So yeah, it's the same.
Chris, did you have a comment?
I did. So one of the things also from the employer perspective that I found very helpful when I had a summer intern from other university to our south a few summers ago was an end of summer survey to talking about what they had done that summer, what was there, and then signing off on it. And that was a requirement there. And I had no problem as the employer of that intern filling that out. So that might be a best practice you could look at, but from a policy perspective, it was addressed earlier by the Career Development Office, but I'd really like to see us closing that gap on unpaid internships, period.
Yeah, I definitely think we can. I think we will continue to do that. I mean, Miles touched on this and I'll highlight Laura Henderson's work. Most schools take their career center money or the career fair money and like, oh, let's just do this with it or hire a person with it. This team and Laura was the one who led this idea. So let's turn this around and benefit our students, and we can get more of those scholarships than we do now. And I hope to be talking with Nick and his team. Is that a thing that we can start fundraising for even more? Because those are important things. That might be the most important learning experience for you. You shouldn't have to say no to it. You can't afford to live somewhere, pay for rent, all this other kind of stuff, and be unpaid for that summer. We've got to close that gap so students can take those amazing experiences, even if for whatever reason that place is not paid.
Maria?
One of our biggest obstacles, and I'm curious if you find it a big major obstacle also, is housing. Really big problem. I wonder if you've got any, because you're, you know, such a big institution, ways to leverage.
I mean, I would share, my previous institution was the largest internship housing institution in Washington, DC. So I know that we have those opportunities in certain places, and there are certain places, mostly the urban ones, that have options like that. But also wasn't a cheap experience for the students. It was about $2,000 for the summer. I think that's one of the things that this group, and I've noticed every co-chair is writing vigorously while you all are asking questions, making comments. It's something we can look at. But I do that tends to be one of the largest options for a lot of our students is, even if it's paid, your whole money might just go to rent for a whole summer. So that's the thing that we can make sure that we're looking at. And Steve, do you want to say something?
So one of the things that I've been hearing here are thinking about internships in a lot of different ways and a lot of really good insights on that. But when Dr. Colton was talking about, say, like arts experiences and things like that, this is one of the reasons that I think we need to broaden definitions of something like internships to maybe work-based experiences. That also applies to students in the School of Education, the College of Education, right? Students in health and behavioral sciences, right? These are all work-based experience that maybe they're paid or unpaid, maybe they're for credit or not credit, but they're all part of the ecosystem that I think we need to be intentional about supporting. That came up a little bit earlier, but I think that's a lot of relevance to what I've been hearing this whole morning.
Well, I just wonder if you can't leverage even just your alumni network for housing, I mean, I don't want anybody moving in with me, but you know, somebody might have a basement. No, I'd take somebody.
And I think that happens really well internally right now.
I know it does.
For us to do not only the employment, but those housing opportunities and things like that.
But I do think there's a equity gap in that piece of it. And because I know it's happening informally.
I like that we're focusing, or that the conversation is focused on the benefit to the student of internship. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the incredible marketing opportunity that internship offers to the university. You know, Mr. Falcon was talking about how in Northern Virginia, we get a lot of exposure to JMU through teachers, right? But if my clients who hire interns all the time got some JMU students, man, that would just explosive. Hey, I had this kid and he was incredibly smart. Now, here's the thing. The kid doesn't even have to be that smart. What really makes an internship work is if the institution makes the process smooth. I knew exactly what to do. I knew what was expected. In the middle of the process, I got some feedback to correct. At the end of the process, they told me how I did So next year it's gonna be even better. And then the kid was excellent, even if the kid was just pretty good. But that gets the name of JMU out there. So, yes, I agree, student first. But oh, by the way, this is a great marketing opportunity to show how fantastic our students are.
And many employers have benefited from the internships coming in with much greater ideas around social media, around marketing, around technology. So I know for a fact that some arts organizations need the 20-year-old intern in order to take them to the next level. So, assessing from the employer's perspective, what was the benefit of the intern is to close the loop all the way around this problem.
I would run the program as an essential piece.
Yeah.
And making it as these companies are not lazy, but they're there to do what they do, whether it's healthcare or IT or cybersecurity, that's what they exist for. So don't make this another thing, do most of the work for them and present it to them as, hey, we have a great opportunity for you to benefit from the tremendous talent that we have in the JMU community.
Yeah, sort of supporting what you were saying, one of the things that we've been talking about is not just, employers reflecting on the internship opportunity or the experience that they had with the students, but it's equally as important for the student at the end of this experience to reflect on what they do, what they gain, what they learn, right? I mean, it's very much a two-way street, and I think both sides can really benefit by making sure you include this reflective.
So any other board comments or questions before we?
Terry, did you have another? That's okay. Okay, go ahead. Just a quick question. Can you share any insight into the industries or kind of the types of roles for internships that are in the highest demand? Any insight on that?
Well, I know all of them, we have the few opportunities probably in our handshake system related to the arts. But other industries are fairly well represented. And we have 20,000 internships. We'll have more data on that as we. And before we launched this, I wrote to every dean and said, who are the folks in your colleges who manage interns? And that's how I got those 125 names. It's that many people in every single college who are sometimes faculty, sometimes administrative assistants, sometimes an associate dean who are managing this. So like I said, we don't have a problem. We just want to coordinate and be able to tell the story and make it more powerful.
Great. All right. Thank you both very much. And we'll look forward to updates. Very good. Okay, with that, thank you all for your patience and for sitting so still. That concludes our agenda for today. So I just wanted to first and foremost wish everybody very, very happy and safe Thanksgiving. And I don't think we will be convening again until after the holidays. So a very, very happy holiday to everyone. And with that, I believe, do I need a motion to adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved.
I just had a quick comment I wanted to make, if I
Go,
could.
please.
Just three things in the spirit of gratitude. Just wrote down three things I wanted to share with the board before we left and convene back for the new year. I wanted to just recognize three things. First, I don't know if many of you probably heard, but I did share it in committee that in October I was able to put together an event called Halftime in the Quad. I just wanted to thank Ms. Tompkins Johnson for being able to come and join us for that event. All the administration, student affairs, all of the divisions really put in together to help that come together. It was just an event to recognize and celebrate students. So thank you for coming and for all of the amazing work that went into that. Secondly, it was mentioned in President Alger's report, but wanted to thank Shawty again, admin, to Ms. Tompkins Johnson and Mr. White for joining us for the space that we created for our community and honor the lives that were lost at UVA. I was actually very surprised at the amount of students that came out to that. And so just grateful that the administration will create spaces for Shawty and I to make recommendations such as that and then support us in being able to bring that together for the community. Last thing that I want to mention was I wanted to thank the board for
just being willing to come together for student dinner last night. The feedback that I was able to just receive as we were leaving was wonderful. One person that was very excited to sit next to President Alger and get a picture. But spaces and moments like this is what helps our students get an awareness of what the board does, what you all do as individuals, but then also being able to hear the experiences and insight that our students bring to the university. And so that is something that I hope will continue. I'm glad that we started it last year as an idea I brought up to Dr. Miller, and hope that it will continue down into the future. So just grateful for you all. As I talk to my peers across the state, they're actually surprised at how much I get to be involved with the board and how much the board wants to actually be involved with the university. So as we look at being the national model, I think that we're doing a great job, especially within this role, that as a board from a student perspective. So thanks so much.
Thank you, as always, Xavier, for everything that you do and for your words. All right, so I believe I have a motion. All those in favor? Any object? All right, thank you very much. And again, travel safe. Meeting adjourned.
Yes, I was gonna say, Colleen, if you want to pass it down. This nice.
Graduation.
First.